Good evening, everybody. I'd like to open the October 25th, 2017 session of the Long Hill Township Committee meeting at 7:35. Could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Debbie, could you call the roll, please?
Committeeman Dorsey.
Here.
Committeeman Maringolo.
Here.
Committeeman Pasurcia.
Present.
Mayor Schuler.
Here. Liaison reports. Start on the left. Bruce?
Let's see, let me start with HPAC. The Cooper Tombstone project is, I shouldn't say Tombstone, it's Cenopath. It is substantially completed. It is a nice installation of historical value down in Turtle Rock Park over by the Sterling train station. I would recommend everybody go take a look. It basically is about some of the first families that were here in Long Hill Township. And there's a nice plaque that's going to go in that's going to describe it. So they did a nice job. I received the invitation. We all received a communication, and then subsequently I received an invitation from our local school board to come and meet with them. So I'll be going over to this K-8 school district school board meeting in November. They're interested in knowing principally two things, giving us an update on enrollment. Apparently they feel like we are misrepresenting the enrollment in our K-8 district, and they want to know about pilot programs, which there are currently none. So that's a short conversation. But I'll be going on November 13th to talk about that and any other subject they have.
Thank you, Bruce.
That's it.
Thank you, Mayor. What I think I'll do is I wanted to give a brief update on some of the meetings we've been attending with NJ American Water and some interactions we've had with residents. There's been a lot of good questions and stuff. But to be fair, I had invited a young man from Food and Water Watch to come here tonight. So I expect that he will be here. And he's not there yet. I don't see him. So I'd rather wait until old business later, and I'll go over some of this stuff at that point.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they need to, or would like to discuss or need to pull?
I'll move Resolution 17-278 through 17-283 as stated in the agenda.
Second.
Committeeman Dorsey.
Yes.
Committeeman Maringolo.
Yes.
Committeeman Pasurcia.
Yes.
Mayor Schuler.
Yes. Moving on to ordinance, first reading of ordinance 403-17, an ordinance adopting a no-knock registry and supplementing and amending section 4-3 entitled Canvassers, Solicitors, and Peddlers in chapter 4 of the Township Code entitled General Licensing. Does anyone have any comments you'd like to discuss?
So I guess I'll just introduce it. Maybe Jackie can talk a little bit about the ordinance itself. But this was brought about by some residents who were concerned that we were getting solicitations late at night, weekends, and inconvenient times. After some discussion here at the Township Committee, Jack has advised us that limiting some of those are difficult based on our First Amendment rights in this country. So we've come up with this no-knock ordinance to try to help the situation. Jack, why don't you talk a little bit about the ordinance, what it does, what it doesn't do?
Yeah, what the ordinance does is, the town, it establishes a do not knock registry, which will be at town hall, so that if a canvasser comes to town hall, they'll be on notice that certain people don't want to be disturbed. It also provides, the town will provide stickers, and I didn't put a cost in there, I figured it would be minimal. It's up to you guys, but it may be more trouble than it's worth to charge people or not, but that's up to you all. We could certainly change that. And people would then put that on their front door or in the vicinity of their front door, and people, canvassers then should not, or solicitors should not knock or ring the doorbell when that sticker's there and the people are on the do not knock registry. You know, at the last meeting, as Bruce said, we discussed the fact that there are numerous court cases that hold you can't prohibit canvassing and soliciting before 9 p.m., which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially in the wintertime when it's dark, but it is what it is. Matt also sent me, he was listening to 101.5, I guess, and Hamilton Township adopted a no-drop ordinance, but I was concerned about the constitutionality of that because there are a number of cases, and it had to do with, remember we used to get all the free newspapers in the driveways, and courts held that you couldn't prohibit those. You know, there was a First Amendment thing, and the do not drop ordinance struck me as that. So I think this is the best we can do under the circumstances, and, you know, it should be effective.
So essentially, we're going to create a registry,
Yes,
and the residents will have a sticker as their participation in this registry.
Yes.
That says, no knock.
Correct.
And anybody who then knocks, if they're displaying that sticker and are participating in the registry, what happens?
They can be issued a summons like violating any other ordinance.
So I think this is a good way to combat this, and quite frankly, if everybody in town participates, then it's sort of does the same thing that we were trying to achieve the other way.
Some people in that made a like company.
Yeah.
The sticker's not a requirement though, right? Or is it?
I think it is in order to make it enforceable. You know, it'd be hard to convict somebody of violating the ordinance if stickers are available and they don't put it up. It's like a parking ordinance. You know, it can be on the books unless there's a sign saying no parking. It's really not.
But if they're if they have to get a permit and they're being provided the list as well, wouldn't that be sufficient? I mean, some people might not like, and I'm not sure I want to put a go away sticker on my front door.
Well, it's not going to, it's going to be, you know, no I agree with you, but I think in order to enforce it, we'd have to do that. As I say, it's similar, people have to be put on notice more than just at the registry, I think.
Well, we could also, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be a sticker. It could be like, you see those security signs planted in the
Yeah, absolutely.
in the lawn bed or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah, I agree. Just some kind of notice so that when people came to your door, they'd be on notice that, you know, they're not supposed to knock, not supposed to bother you.
What we would have to do as a result of this ordinance is we'd have to figure out what the notification would be, whether it's a little lawn sign,
Right.
whether it's a sticker,
And there are a number of other towns we could look at for samples.
So, should we pass this, then I would ask Nancy to investigate different options and costs and things like that.
There's a motion, I think, so I'll second it.
Was there a motion? Did you make a motion?
Bruce did.
Okay, sorry, didn't
So
hear.
moved. There you go.
Second.
Committeeman Dorsey?
Yes.
Committeeman Naringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Pasurcia?
Yes.
Mayor Schuler?
Yes. And this will be,
The 29th of November.
Right. There's one other point I would like to make. You may have seen in the newspaper that the Attorney General came down like a ton of bricks on Mawa for a number of things.
Yeah, I saw
But
it.
one of which was a no-knock ordinance, but I think it's because their motivation was
It'll
to
solicit people buying, selling, trying to sell by people's houses.
Orthodox Jewish people from Suffern going door to door, whereas this is not directed at any one group, or especially any ethnic group, so I think we're okay.
Yeah, because I read what the judge had said. It was specific.
Well, the Attorney General's going after him, yes.
so second reading and
I just
adoption
thought I
was
should raise it.
November
November
29th. November 29th. Moving on to ordinance 404-17, another first reading for introduction, creating the position of Planning and Zoning Coordinator and supplementing and amending Chapter 2 of the Township Code entitled Administration. Jack, can you give us a little background on this, please?
Yes, the position of Planning and Zoning Administrator in town evolved over the years. It really evolved with Dawn Wolf, who was the Planning Board Secretary and the Board of Adjustment Secretary, and she received a certification from a state association as Planning and Zoning Administrator. So the boards started referring to her as the Planning and Zoning Administrator, and at various parts in the ordinance, it assigned duties to the Planning and Zoning Administrator, but the position was never really officially created. I don't think it had to be, but I think it's a lot clearer if it does. So we had discussed doing that and also giving other duties to the Planning and Zoning Coordinator. We've changed the title because it's not tied to that state association certification. So if you go through in subsection 1, it creates the office. In 2, it's really an indeterminate term at the pleasure of the Township Committee. 3, qualifications, it requires background, education, and experience in the areas of planning and zoning. And then the meat of it is that it sets forth the powers and duties of the Planning and Zoning Coordinator. A, to supervise the staff of the Planning and Zoning Department. B, supervise the activities of the Township Zoning Officer and coordinate enforcement activities between and among the zoning officer, the construction office, and the fire official. Be the staff liaison of the Planning Board, the Board of Adjustment, the Environmental Commission. And if you've got an earlier version of the agenda, there was a typo, and it should be and work with members of the boards. It says working in some of the earlier versions. That's been corrected. D, interface with consulting planners and engineers employed by the Township Committee, the Planning Board, and the Board of Adjustment. E, act as the municipal housing liaison for COA purposes. I know COA is dormant, but the position still has to be there. Be the administrative officer charged with reviewing development applications and requests for administrative waivers and determining whether they are complete in accordance with the provisions of the MLUL. And I think you have to understand that completeness was recently defined by a court, and I think I circulated copies, to really just be the administrative function of going through the checklist and making sure that all the required items are submitted, 18 copies of the plans, whatever, as opposed to reviewing it on the merits. Serve as a member of the Technical Review Committee, serve as the board secretary, as that term is defined in the ordinance. I serve as the recording secretary and attend all board meetings and take minutes and perform such other duties as may be requested by the Township Committee. So those are the proposed duties of this position.
So, I mean, we've talked about this for quite some time.
Yes.
This is really formalizing what really should have always been the case.
Correct.
And so I support it. My only concern is this, and I had a brief conversation with one of the chairs on the way in just now, is we've always said we would at least talk with them about it. And I don't think they had a chance to review what honestly is something that I'm gonna vote for. But
So we did.
Right.
They had a copy. This was originally on the agenda probably 4 months ago. when
Yeah, I
we pulled
remember
it
that.
out.
And I guess.
Had given them a copy, had a discussion, and we made the changes and incorporated some of the changes that they had asked for. However, I do concede that updated copy, I got it from here.
And that was my conversation.
And
And they said.
they didn't
he
have
said,
that
I didn't
updated.
see.
Right.
The amendments, not that, maybe they're fine with it.
I think the amendments were in response to their
The
request.
the amendments were in response to the request, and basically,
there are no
saying that they got
changes
it,
made.
that there
The
was,
frustrating thing is there was this appearance back then that might have been a little heavy-handed by the Township Committee, which was never the intent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we reached a good spot. And now that it appeared without them knowing it was on the agenda, that's the only thing I'm saying. Now, granted, this is only first reading.
I was going to say, there are two things. Since Nancy's in the process of hiring a planning and zoning coordinator, it may be helpful to have at least introduced. We can always make changes in response to
Right.
comments from the boards. It's up to you, but I think it would be helpful to Nancy, I don't want to speak for her, to have something in writing to show people she interviews, these are,
Well, and
these are your
that's
duties.
kind of why it's here, right? This is a position we've been trying to fill for,
So I want to
A
be
little
clear,
bit.
you didn't feel comfortable introducing it when I was the acting administrator. That's what I just heard. Anyway, I think, I get it, I think it's all above board, I think we're in a good spot. I just wanted to point out that I don't think they received it. So they'll have an opportunity between now
Yes.
and second reading, and I'm good with that.
and as I say, we can always continue the public hearing.
Right.
Make changes in response to their comments. This is not a final.
Fair enough.
So I'll move ordinance 404-17 as stated in the agenda upon first reading with second reading on November 29th.
Matt?
Yes, I'm reading. What?
Oh,
Yeah, whatever you, what's the question?
we're waiting for a second.
Oh, I'll second it.
Committeeman Dorsey?
Yes.
Committeeman Naregolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Pasurkia?
Yes.
Mayor Schuler?
yes. And that takes us to, wow, discussion items, action items, charging stations. Can you just give us a brief update?
Sure. We received bids, I'm sorry, quotes, two quotes to install an electric car charging station. You already talked about this, right?
Correct.
So we've got two quotes to install the charging station in the back parking lot. We moved it over a little bit so there's better lighting, which was a requirement. There's a few questions that we need to answer. Rob is here. So I'll maybe talk to him later, so everybody doesn't have to listen, but things about how we keep track of electric and things like that. But once we have those answers, we'll be ready to start the electrician, and then they're gonna deliver the charging station, and the whole thing should take about a month.
So now this is something that is intended to be paid for by JCP&L?
JCP&L is picking up the costs of the installation, and one of the quotes that we got was over the cost that they were going to reimburse, and one was under, so we're clearly going to use the one that was under. So 100% of the costs for installation would be reimbursed by JCP&L. They will own it for 2 years, and then after 2 years, it is 100% ours to use however you see fit.
What if we don't want it?
You can dump it, scrap it for scrap
But then
metal.
do we have to pay somebody to remove it, or just put a sledgehammer to it?
They don't care what you do with it,
Oh,
so
okay.
you can take a sledgehammer if
All
you
right.
want.
You volunteering?
Sure. Knock something around, why not?
Okay, so you don't need anything from us at this point. We're still trying to put together all the options.
Yeah, I'm
For
just trying to get the
charging
information
and-
as far as, right, charging the people for the use of it, or how we keep track, because there is a reporting requirement that JCPL requires. So I'm not sure how people lease it.
Is that Rob? Come on up,
Yeah,
please.
Good evening, Freeholder.
Good evening, Mayor and Committeeman. Rob Walden, Jersey Central Power and Light, 52 Chatham Road, City of Summit. Yes, we are going to be installing these in some of our municipalities because we wish to track their use so we can gauge the interest in and use of electrical charging stations as we begin to prepare the grid and our infrastructure for what we see as a growth in electric car use. So for the first 2 years, it does belong to JCP&L. We will be tracking the usage of the device. Every time someone comes to use the charging station, they sign up with an app through the vendor, and then each individual usage is tracked by the vendor, and they give that information to us, and we can certainly share that with the township as well, so you have an idea of what's
So-
the usage is.
So we don't need to track it.
No, you don't. The vendor that we're using tracks all of this at
Okay,
depth.
that answers one
Okay,
question.
the agreement says that we need to do it, so I just wanted to clarify that.
That's not my
The
understanding. but I'll
municipality
clarify.
must provide parking space rental information, including the dates and number of times the spaces were rented, along with the length of time for each space rental. And I wasn't sure how we would be doing
That should all be part of what's the information that you can gather from the device when somebody goes to use it.
So is there like a
So
printout
that-
we could get?
That the device has a cellular connection, they'll be able to download that information directly.
Who, we can
The vendor will
download
be,
it?
the vendor that supplies the device.
So when this says municipality has to provide it, we don't have to do
I
that?
don't believe so, no.
So maybe you could give us
I will
the-
clarify that,
thank you.
certainly, yes.
Okay. And then as far as the, oh, I'm sorry, do you mind?
No, go ahead.
So as far as the, if people wanted to charge, like they put a credit card in,
Correct.
right? And then they would pay for the energy that they're being, that they're
If that's how
getting.
if that's how you wish to have it configured, yes. It can be configured to give energy away for free. It can be configured to give energy away at a fee, and you can set that fee at whatever you choose.
Okay. And then is there a separate, it seemed like there's a separate rental space charge that people can,
That's if you wish to charge people to use the space above and beyond just using the electricity.
so you could charge for the space alone, for the electricity, or for both?
If you prefer, yes.
Okay. Can you just say how, if other towns have this, how do they keep track of who's,
They don't
The
bother with
schedule.
that. They just use they just charge for the usage. They don't charge for the space.
okay. And,
For that very reason, because it would be very hard to keep track of, and it makes for a logistical issue.
okay, and this 2 cars at one time can charge?
Correct.
All right, and so those 2 spots need to be kept empty all the time?
Preferably, yes. Obviously, if you've got the end of a soccer game and parents are coming to pick up their kids, I'm sure those spots will be taken without cars being charged, but the idea would be to have the spots unoccupied so that if someone comes along and wishes to charge their car, they can.
So it's not, you're not requiring us to keep the spots empty?
We're not going to come around and check on you, no, Guy. If somebody, as I said, if somebody happens to occupy them, nobody's going to complain.
If you want to,
Ideally, they should
if you
be
want to up
left
the,
open.
the reimbursement cost, we can move it to a spot further away from the soccer fields. We're willing to do that.
No. I'm not authorized to give that away, sorry.
And it has to be, but it has to be on municipal land for this program?
That's our preference, yes.
Preference or requirement?
Preference?
Preference.
Ah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
also a different color.
So if it was put outside, say, a Starbucks, and we haven't spoken with the owner of that property, does that work, or no? Preference-
The idea is for a municipality to use it for at one of their facilities. That's our preference.
Fair enough.
If a commercial entity wanted to buy one, then we would certainly, the vendor could certainly sell them one.
Now, after the 2-year time frame, what happens with that vendor who's managing that device? Is that a subscription that we then have to subscribe to, or how does that arrangement typically work?
Yes, the township could then enter an agreement with the vendor and continue their management of the device, the software, the charging receipts, or you could abandon it if you like, but that would be something that you would have to agree with the vendor.
It's charge point, right?
Correct.
Is there an opportunity to upcharge on these?
Yes, absolutely. So if it costs you if a car comes in to charge at Long Hill Township, and they want to buy $25 worth of electricity from JCP&L, you could charge them $25.10 and make 10 cents on or more. You could give it away at exactly 25 at cost. You could give it away for less than cost. That's a decision that the Township Committee would be free to make.
So I have a question about when people, if the governing body chooses to charge people for the electricity, and somebody puts their credit card in, the credit card company sends us a check? Like, how do we get paid for that?
You'd have an agreement with the vendor that would give the money would go to the vendor would issue the check to the township.
Okay, so then we'd have to keep that vendor. It's not just for information, it's
Correct.
for them, so we'd have to keep that
So
going.
they're
after
handling
2 years.
everything.
Do you have information on the vendor, Nancy?
I don't.
We met with the vendor guy when he was here. I'll send you the vendor's information as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to know what we have in store for us in 2 years, I assume they're just taking a cut off the top and that could get built in, but we should probably confirm that.
Okay.
Okay,
Is that it?
thank you, Rob.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good one. Good night. Old business.
Anybody else?
Go ahead.
So since we're so far along in this meeting, so the mayor and I, and in a couple of cases, the deputy mayor and I, and actually Committeeman Dorsey have attended some meetings with local residents, local groups. We've had several town halls, and we've attended some of the private meetings that were held as well. And I could say I'm very impressed and thankful for residents that have gone to these meetings and expressed or, concerns or asked questions. And I wrote down some of my favorite ones that I think are worth answering, because I think these particular questions, even though they were asked by one individual, probably apply to a larger group. One, and I hadn't even thought about this one, somebody in town said to me, "Hey, Guy, there's a turn lane now into South Main. Does this mean there's been, some plan to develop the south part of Valley Road?" And I can honestly say, I had no recollection that there was a turn lane there. So I said, let me look into it. I spoke to an officer, as it turns out, and Cornell, being the smart person that he is, just look on Google Earth. But in fact, that turn lane has been there since at least the last time Valley Road was paved, which I'm assuming 12-year life, maybe 05, 07, somewhere in there. And Google Earth, in fact, proved that. So that turn lane has always been there, and I'm embarrassed to say I never even noticed it. This is an interesting one. Cornell, I'm going to ask you to opine on it, but let me go through the questions first, but you're the most knowledgeable on this. Some residents said, you know what, we support the sale, we get it, but what we're frustrated in is, why are we in this position that we're forced to sell? Why wasn't capital investment put into this over the last 20 years so we aren't in this position today? Now, personally, I think the sewer system should be sold, whether it was up to date or not. But that aside, the question that was asked by several people is, yeah, I get it, we're gonna have to sell, but if we had only kept this up to date over all these years. So maybe you can give a little bit of a chronology on that when I turn it back to you. An interesting one, and Cornell, the mayor asked me to look into this with DEP. A comment had been made that a concern was on the, what we call the Tifa property, could, if a developer were to build there, divide the lot and essentially create two LLCs, and Jack, maybe you can opine it, create two LLCs and almost bankrupt. Well, actually, one thing I did when I called the DEP, the first concern was that once it's developed, the DEP will just go away and allow the owner to monitor it. And I said to the person I called at the DEP, I said, promise not to laugh. He said, I promise not to laugh. I said, as soon as this is developed, if it's developed, will you let them self-monitor and walk away? And of course, he laughed at me and said, it's a Superfund site. We're never going away. But Jack,
On the subdivision question, there are a number of things. The first point is that a property owner has to go before the planning board in order to get subdivision approval. So the town would have the ultimate control over that. The second thing is, and I've talked to the township planner about this, is when she drafts the ordinance, just to require minimum lot size of 11.5 acres, or close to what the Tifa property is, so it can't be subdivided. The third point is that it's part of the Mount Laurel settlement, so the court's not going to allow the developer to do that either. So I don't see any risk.
right, so
From a possible
the DEP is
subdivision of
never
property.
going away,
Right.
and it's never going to get subdivided.
And it's not going to absolve them from liability by separating them. They're still going to be the property owner in the chain of title and be responsible for the cleanup.
Right, and the DEP confirmed what we already know.
Yes.
If any development takes place there, again, and I say if, once they put shovel to ground, they own it. They
That's
own
correct.
whatever they find.
That's right.
So it will be cleaned up if in fact something is found. Fine. Now, the mayor also asked me to contact the DEP to talk about the mythical or mystical dreaded letter that the town received in May of this year. But the reason why I contacted, we know that the letter exists. It's been on our website, I think, since May, June, whenever, when we first received it. So the letter's there for anybody who wants to read it for themselves. But that really wasn't the point of my call. The point of my call was to find out how many towns before the change in capacity regulations exceeded it. And there's a long-winded way of, the explanation came, it's in writing, I sent it to everybody. And Jack, if you can, parse it and maybe we can put it on the website. But the short story is this. Between '08 and '13, 129 towns were in violation, 129 towns, of which, of course, one was Long Hill Township. They don't revisit, if you've been in violation once, that counts for that period. So it could have been, 100 times.
If I could interject for just a second so that people understand what you're talking about. Violation of exceeding the rated flow
Correct,
of our sewer capacity.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So 129 towns were in violation of the old regulation, which is the 80%. The new regulation came in place in May of this year. That's why we received the letter. It was increased to 95% of what?
The regulated flow.
Okay. After the new regulation was put in place, 3, and I think the mayor and I misspoke once before. We said 1, but in fact it's 3. So we go from 129 to 3. There's the Woodcliff section treatment plant in North Bergen Township. There's Chatham Borough, and of course yours truly, Long Hill Township.
Chatham or Chester?
Chester, did I say Chatham? I apologize, I have a lot of friends in Chatham. It's Chester
Not
Borough.
anymore.
Chester Borough. So North Bergen, Chester Borough, and Long Hill Township exceed the new regulation. So I just wanted to make sure we're on the record accurately, not 1, 3, and of course, Long Hill Township is one of them. The mayor, maybe you can opine on the idea that I think a comment was made that the township doesn't have a plan to address it. Of course, we have like 300 pages of engineering reports going back to '09. We know exactly what we need to do. If the sale goes through, that's great. We can just maybe put them in a dustbin. If the sale doesn't go through, I think our next meeting is November 8th. We will have an action plan to present to the DEP. We have a pretty good idea of what we will do going forward. So, don't think that the township committee doesn't know what we're going to do or that we're not on top of this. We are, and that would go into effect almost immediately. A friend had mentioned to me, the concern is that if we were to sell, that decisions regarding development and increasing capacity in town would end up being made by NJ American Water and not the town. And Jack, I'll again turn it over to you. As I understand it, we are in control of the ordinances. We are in control of the master plan. I don't think we turn over any control.
That's exactly right. I mean, development occurs where it's permitted by zoning. So New Jersey Water, American Water is not going to control development. And based on their statements, their interest in is, and they're forced by the terms of the agreement to expand coverage, but they're interested in going to those areas that are economically viable, which have enough density to make it worth their while. So they're not going to direct it to a certain area to promote development when the zoning ordinance doesn't allow it. There's no benefit to them.
And then I'm going to turn it over to the mayor. But first off, I want to thank everybody. These questions, we sit up here and we talk, we deliberate amongst ourselves, and we're reasonably intelligent people, but we might miss concerns that might be out there because we didn't know, maybe we didn't explain it clearly enough. So I really appreciate these questions coming. We have at least one more town hall on October 30th. I forget the time. Is it 10 a.m.?
Monday, 10 a.m.
Monday, 10 a.m., October 30th. Please, please, please bring questions. Our emails are on the website. You can, and a lot of you know us, you can call us, email us. NJ American Water, on their website, it says, I think the first thing you see, you can ask them a question and they answer it within 24 hours. So please, don't be in the dark on this. This is important. This is a decision that's going to affect this town for a long, long time. So now, the mayor, I forget I was giving you two questions. Did you write them down?
I wrote one of them down. I didn't even know what
All right.
you did with the second.
While you're answering the first one, I'll find the second one I was turning over to you.
Okay. So past investment in the sewer system was the first point that you brought up. So it's not that the system didn't receive any investment over the years. Let me see if I get the date right. December 2000 and, was it 13 or, I think it was 13. We approved a bond ordinance for $4.5 million to do plant improvements and upgrades and a limited amount of I&I, inflow and infiltration remediation in downtown Sterling. So that was basically the direct, a small step, but a direct step to try and address the horribly leaking pipes that we have in town. And at the time, the committee, when we approved that, we actually, and I think it was Brendan who made a very pointed comment, that it was the intention of the committee to continue, based upon the Omni Plan of 2010, to continue investing. At the time, we threw out a target number, pie in the sky number of about $1 million a year, right? So we had an intention to move forward with that, to stop the leakage and try and get out of the sewer ban at some point. However, sometime around the following year's timeframe with budget cycle, we, and this would probably be 2015, right? Because 14, we were just starting to do the work that we had just approved in December. So for 2015 budget cycle, we already had been having discussions around, whether or not we should sell the sewer plant. We had meetings with other municipalities regarding outsource and management arrangements, leasing arrangements. I think we spoke with, was it South Amboy, with with the horrible concession deal that they had that they regretted. And so we decided that it would not be in the taxpayers' best interest to go and spend $1 million a year on pipelining for something that we may take a different tactic on, whether that be sell. At the time, we didn't know if it was sell, outsource, or whatever. So that's why that bit of work stopped, and it took, unfortunately, a little longer than I think than we had hoped to get to the point where we made a decision late last year around, actually finally decided to put a sale up for a vote, a referendum vote. At which point it was the recommendation of the wastewater committee, if we're going to put this up for a referendum for a sale, we need to know a couple of things, right? We're going to get a bid. We don't know whether or not that bid has value or not. So we agreed to do a study to determine as best possible what the value of the sewer plant was, or is, which came in at $25 million. And in context, that is a net book value. And what that means is, this pump cost you $100. It's halfway through its life, your book value is $50. Okay, it's a very simple depreciation scale. The other thing that we also did, because ultimately a sale really comes down to one thing, and that's what the rates are gonna look like for the future. And we knew that when we put a bid document out, we would get a set of, we would put some constraints around rate increases, and we would get a rate chart for a period of time from the purchaser, which is great, but we wouldn't know what our rates were gonna look like. So we also commissioned a 20-year capital improvement study from a qualified and licensed engineering firm who specializes in wastewater to come to our plant, take a look at our plant, meet with all the people, go to all the facilities, inspect everything, and then give us an engineering assessment of what this committee, if we keep it, right, if we keep the sewer plant, what should this committee be looking at doing on a year-by-year basis for the next 20 years? And both of those studies are available on the website. So and they were remarkably, as far as the I&I remediation, kind of remarkably consistent to what the Omni Environmental Study of 2010 said. However, the Omni Environmental Study of 2010 actually gave multiple options. There was actually a $16 million version in the Omni study that said, we're going to do a 50% I&I reduction, only 50, and we're going to build an equalization tank, and that's going to cost $16 million to do.
I knew there was a 16 number, I
Yeah,
kept saying it.
there was. The bid option was $8.3 million, which I think was, and I'm going off memory here, so my numbers might be off by a little bit, which was a 25% reduction in leakage and the construction of an equalization tank next to the treatment plant. And what an equalization, our problem with the sewer system is around, and hopefully you guys are all here about the sewer system, because if you're not, you're bored out of your mind. When it rains, we get a lot of groundwater and a lot of rain coming into our sewer system, because the pipes are, lots of them are 100 years old, and they leak. So the reason our rating is where it is, and the reason that we keep exceeding the rating, is not because we have too many homes. It's because we have all the leakage, and the DEP will not give us a permit because they know that when it's a wet season with groundwater, and they know that when it rains, we get a lot of stuff into the system. So we're kind of stuck with our rating until we get rid of the leakage problem.
And to your point, and I think the comments that were made to me wasn't just for this committee. I think this committee has invested money, but it goes back to the 09-10. For those who don't know or don't remember, whatever, the vote to actually move forward with the $16 million passed 3-2, but as the mayor has pointed out many times, you have to bond with a 4-1 vote, so it failed 3-2.
Right.
So nothing happened from that 10 vote, I think it was 2010.
Right.
Vote. Now, before that,
Now, so in fairness, right, the Omni study of 2010 was, that was a rather extensive study, and that was some very detailed work that took place between probably early 2007 and 2009. There were flow meters in probably every main intersection of the sewer system in town, analyzing the flow for various periods of time to determine what the bad section, what the leakiest sections of town were. They had cameras down any pipe that could fit a camera to take a look at what the inside of the pipes looked like. So that was a 2-year bit of work to get up to the Omni study of 2000. We call it the Omni study of 2009, but I think it came like late 2010, but I think it came like late 2009, early 10. So it, so the work started probably '07, and, and there was also previous work done, probably 2008 or 2009 with pumping stations around town. So 5 of the 8 pumping stations in Long Hill were rebuilt probably around the 2007, 2008 timeframe.
Around-
Give or,
yeah, so
give,
that-
give, give or take. So there's been investment in various pieces, but the real root of the problem is the leakage, and the only investment in the leakage was the $1.5 million or $1.3 million that we did in downtown Sterling in 2013.
But before the '07, beginning of that study, '08, I don't think back in like '05, '06, nothing was.
I don't think any, I mean, I only moved in '03, so I wasn't following it, so I can't speak before that, but I don't remember anything for 3, 4, and 5, so.
Okay. And I remembered my second question, which probably dovetails to Jack, so if anybody's
Yeah, you don't want me
tired of hearing
answering.
Cornell's voice.
I went too long.
But it was something I did want to ask. So whether the plant sells or not, the obligation for COA, fair share, Mount Laurel, low income, moderate, whatever you want to call it today, although the proper term is, of course, fair share, does that change as a result of whether we sell, don't sell, whether we add capacity, don't add capacity?
It does not. The courts have held that we have a Mount Laurel obligation to provide for low and moderate income housing. Regardless of whether the plant sells or not, the township is going to have to make improvements to the sewer plant to provide enough capacity to meet its affordable housing obligation.
Whether they're ever built or not.
That's correct.
So we would have to put.
We'd have to bond. If the plant sale does not go through, the township will have to bond to construct the improvements required to expand the capacity to allow for the construction of low and moderate income
Even
housing.
if the housing is not built.
That's correct, because we have to provide a reasonable opportunity. And that's regardless of the settlement with fair share. If it had gone to trial, the same rule would have applied, that we would have been required to have the infrastructure to allow. You can't avoid your Mount Laurel obligation by not making infrastructure
Yeah,
improvements.
because when I mentioned earlier, we are masters of our own fate. That is a true statement, except when it comes to the New Jersey Supreme Court.
That's correct. Now, assuming we get a period of repose, we will control that. We won't be subject to builders' remedy lawsuits until at least 2025.
And that, is that hearing public? Because it's
date.
not assigned. It's not assigned, I mean, thing, the fair share has agreed with us? or-
Yes, fair share is agreed, the court has to approve it.
Right, and the court date is, the court date was moved from December 1st to December.
December 15th, right,
15th.
because of scheduling conflicts.
With fair share, by the
Correct.
way.
Yes.
I'm sure the mayor's happy. I've run out of questions.
Enjoy a minute.
Actually, I have one. I know something came up, or I thought it did last week, about, I guess, there's some statements out there that the sewer is actually below average the last 3 months or something?
So I don't know,
I mean, I'm sure it's all unfounded hearsay, but,
I saw the numbers, I'm not sure of the source, because the source wasn't listed, but I went onto the DEP website, and they actually have an they have a static version of our, of every town's capacity, and they also have an interactive version, and so I ran, I'm gonna wind up doing this from memory because I don't have the numbers in front of me and it's gonna take me too long to find. If memory serves, the numbers as the 12-month average as of August 2017 was about 110% of capacity. And when I ran the report, putting in a date of October 25th to the October 25th, 2016 to October 24th, 2017, which was the day I ran the report, it came back with something like 126% of capacity. So we are the 12-month average, according to the DEP, is not just above 95%, it's above our rated capacity.
Well, and the other thing is the DEP was calling us this week anyway, wondering what we're doing. So clearly we're still on their radar when they're actually calling here on Monday or Tuesday.
Hold up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just saying is that we're not flying under the radar here.
Yeah. But at least it's not one, it's
Three.
3 towns, so we,
Well, yeah,
They-
three,
they can-
three towns out of 565, do the math.
yeah, I didn't look what their flow rates are, so I don't know who's the worst. I mean, they could be worse than we are, and that could be the target for the DEP. I don't know. I don't have the number, but I will check. Kind of wanted to do the other one first, but, okay. The Oak Street parking, it's on the agenda. You cut that one off.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so thank you for that old business update. We'll get to questions on that in a second. Just let us go quickly through the other item that we have. Off-street parking, you would,
I gotta wake up,
mean-
sorry.
yes, did I put you to sleep?
You want to start?
So we have a continuing issue in Sterling regarding parking. Last meeting, we took the action to waive some of the requirements. Jack has recommended that we modify that, so he can talk about that exactly. I have spent some time with Tom Sweeney, our DPW director, and our township engineer on some alternatives. The township owns the lot to the north of Railroad Avenue, between Railroad Avenue and the train station. It also owns a lot to the east at the end of Railroad Avenue. Some of those might be constrained by wetlands, so we would need to get some surveys done and some wetlands delineations. So I've asked our township engineer to talk with our wetland environmental, or I should say our environmental guys that do some of that wetland surveying for us. He's going to get us some quotes as to what it might take. But basically what we need to do is we need to do a little bit of research to see if we can utilize those properties for additional parking, maybe widening Railroad Avenue, and whatever other alternatives we can come up with. But at this point, I've asked him to find out what the cost might be. So at some point, probably next meeting, we'll have some understanding. He'll get back to Nancy and we'll know what we might need to invest to do some of the investigative work over there. Additionally, I've asked Jack to look at some of our ordinances in terms of parking, to see if there are things that we can improve. So Jack, let me turn it over to you. Let's talk about what we did 2 weeks ago, what you recommend, and then maybe some of our existing ordinance and what you suggest there as well.
Okay, sure. First, at the last meeting, the Township Committee adopted a motion holding in abeyance enforcement of various ordinances while the planning board studied the question of parking in downtown Sterling. Based on concerns raised by Mr. Sandow and the mayor, I think it's just too confusing to try to do it by formal resolution. So I suggest that you repeal that motion last time and that the Township Committee just deal with enforcement while this matter is being studied by the planning board administratively.
I have no issue with that. Essentially, it nets the same result.
Correct.
So I don't know, do we have a motion, I mean, a number on that we need, or can I just make it in general?
Yeah, it was just a motion.
So you can just
Yeah.
make the motion.
So I'd make a motion that we repeal the action from 2 weeks ago regarding Sterling zone parking.
Yeah, and that we deal with zoning issues in downtown Sterling during the period of the study administratively.
As stated.
Committeeman Dorsey?
Yes.
Committeeman Maringolo?
Yes.
Committeeman Searcher?
Yes.
Mayor Schuler?
Yes.
Now that we've gotten that out of the way, Bruce asked me to look at the ordinance and other ordinances, and I know the planning board is studying this, but there are some things they may want to consider. I'm not a planner, I'm not suggesting any of these things, but they are options that could be considered. And the site plan ordinances is intertwined with the whole parking issue. And we have a very strict site plan ordinance at this point in time. So some things we may want to do with respect to the site plan ordinance are not require site plan approval for a change of occupancy, which the ordinance currently does. So if you sell your hardware store now to somebody else for a hardware store, you've got to go in and at least get a site plan waiver. Some other towns don't require site plan approval for de minimis exterior changes to a building, or for interior changes. And that decision can be left up to the planning and zoning coordinator. They'd have to not be de minimis change, or they'd have to be not de minimis changes to require site plan approval, or change the aesthetic appearance, or result in setback requirements or things like that. With respect to parking provisions, one thing a number of other towns do, because parking is a universal problem in downtown areas, some towns allow the parking requirements to be satisfied in off-site locations. Either you can rent property from somebody else, or they require them to park in municipal parking lots, or of course you can lower the parking requirements. It's the number of spots per square foot or per table. You know, there are various formulas in the ordinance for parking requirements. Let's see. Those are the main things I came up with, just.
And then the other, thing that we talked about is the situation with Biagio's, where half the restaurant is used at 1 hour versus another half that's used in another hour, but our ordinance requires for all the seating be calculated regardless of when it's used.
Including seasonal.
Including seasonal. So what I would suggest at this point is, Jack, if you could, send out a memo to us as to outlining these issues that we've identified, and then maybe we could send them over to the planning board for them to incorporate into their discussion.
Sure.
So that we have the dialogue moving forward.
Yep, I will add it to my list.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a perfect time. I mean, we at last night's planning board meeting, we saw the results of the focus group that they had in, for both Sterling and Millington. And there was some good information in those results. There were actually a few surprises. And those, the results of those studies actually will be put on the website soon, if they aren't already. I did not check today, but I know we discussed yesterday putting them up there. So I think this would be a good time, and interestingly, one of the things that came out of that was, they kind of want more coffee shops, more type of stuff like that. So go figure. So if we're going to go down that road, I think there's definitely some stuff that we're going to need to do. And I think we might even want to engage the Morris County folks with a little bit of help, because they had some interesting ideas as far as new types of businesses, to attract businesses to try and compete against online for some things. So it's pretty interesting.
Can't get a hot cup of coffee online.
No, you can't get a hot cup of coffee online.
Pretty soon you will. Be delivered by drone.
All right, so I think, that's really, sort of the topics for parking to continue the discussion, and if we can get some better dialogue going, Jack, if you could frame it for us, and so we can get the planning board to talk about it as well.
Yep, I will.
And
for
then
the next meeting.
we'll get some quotes for, options down from Paul and the environmental people, and then we can have some further discussions.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, we both know I'm Colombo. I always have just one more, right?
Yeah.
And I apologize, I should have done this earlier. For those of you know, I mean, there's a lot of people this committee knows, I think all of our boards know very well, the executive director of the Great Swamp Watershed Association, Sally Rubin. She's testified before this committee many times, before the planning board, the Board of Adjustment, the Shade Tree Commission, the Environmental Commission is very familiar with her, and I think a lot of people in town, of course, know who the Great Swamp Watershed Association is. So she wrote a letter which is going to be on our website, and I believe it's going to be in this week's edition of the Echoes, or it certainly will be on there, the website. She asked me to read it tonight, and it's not that long, so I will. Dear Editor, as Executive Director of the Great Swamp Watershed Association, I've been asked by many people to comment on the proposed sale of the Long Hill Wastewater Treatment Facility to New Jersey American Water. Most recently, in May 2017, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection notified Long Hill that it has exceeded 95% of permitted flow for the 12 consecutive month average. DEP requires a plan for remediation and the ability to implement that plan. I believe the sale of the system will provide the most efficient and effective method to accomplish this. Unfortunately, Long Hill's wastewater treatment facility has frequent capacity exceedances, which bypass the system's filters and result in discharge of partially untreated effluent into the Passaic River. In lay terms, polluted water is intentionally discharged into the Passaic. Additionally, expanding sewer capacity will enable an additional 7% of the town's residences to transfer from private septic systems to the public sewer system. Most of the impacted homes have old, poorly functioning septic systems in an area with high water tables. These systems may contaminate the environment. The sale of the wastewater treatment system will facilitate improvements to old infrastructure, which will reduce stormwater inflow and infiltration and improve reliability of the system, reducing contamination of our rivers and environment. Sincerely, Sally Rubin, Executive Director of the Great Swamp Watershed Association. Full disclosure, I've said it many times, but I should repeat it, having read that letter. I am on the Board of Trustees. I'm on the Executive Board, and I am the Treasurer of the Great Swamp Watershed Association. So I don't want anybody to say I did not say that. But as far as this organization, you can look it up on your own if you so choose. But I think many people in town know what this organization does. And the Great Swamp, a third of the Great Swamp, is in Long Hill Township. It's probably the jewel of this town. So that, I'm done.
You sure?
I am.
Any new business? Announcements. First and foremost, November 7th, a reminder to vote. Don't care if you vote yes or no. I'd love to see all 6,000 or so registered voters that we have on the results list for the sewer referendum. October 28th, Friends of the Library Shredding Fundraiser from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Questions, email longhillfol@gmail.com. The Force Tiger Tracks 5K race is October 29th from 7 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. at Central Middle School. We have a prescription drug drop-off October 28th at the library from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Please note, if you're looking at an agenda, it says Town Hall, but it is in fact at the library. And there is a free rabies shot clinic at Bernards Township Public Works Garage on November 11th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And with that, I will open up the meeting to the public for remarks and statements pertaining to any matter. If you could keep them to 3 minutes, please, because Everyone's yelled at me when I let them go longer.
Good evening, Larry Fast from Gillette.
Hi, Larry.
Probably wondering what I'm doing up here tonight. Well, tonight I'm here as the Vice President of the Long Hill Township Historical Society, and I asked to sit nearby in case I need her expertise, Kathy File, who is the treasurer. And the issue is one that we want to bring up. As you may know, the Historical Society has, for the better part of the last decade, been meeting at the First Aid Squad next door on Thursday evenings. And there has been, on the executive board, discussion about moving that to a permanent change that was tried as an experiment about a year ago, which was in the restored Old Millington Schoolhouse, Old Town Hall building on a Sunday afternoon. It was one of the best turnouts we ever received, and we're looking at maybe trying to do that as a real permanent change going forward in 2018. So the issues are not many. Kathy met with Lisa Scanlon this afternoon. There are no scheduling problems. Lisa seems to be the person responsible for getting the building scheduled and making any arrangements. The only issue that came up was one of insurance. And so there are some questions that I have because we've been meeting in a township-owned building where this was never an issue before. But if it is an issue, then it's something that we need to address and find out what the best way to do that is. Lisa had made the suggestion that the Historical Society, which is really completely independent, it's a 501c3, it stands on its own, not really a part of the township. I guess, Kathy, she said appointed was the term. I'm not sure that you can really appoint an independent 501c3, but I suppose it means creating some kind of an official linkage which would allow the current insurance to cover it. But first is to find out, is it even a problem? And then we'll figure out how to solve it.
Go ahead.
Oh, those requirements can be waived and are sometimes for local civic groups like that. The HPAC would certainly be covered. Yeah, so I would suggest that we talk to the risk manager and ask him, because actually CERT is a separate 501c3 organization as well, and I believe we provide their insurance, so I don't see that it would be a major problem. You know, it's really...
Hi, Kathy.
Come to the mic, please.
Use the microphone, please, and identify yourself.
I'm Kathy File, and I'm with the Historical Society. But in the past, I did speak with Neil Henry, and he had no problem with it. It was just today when I came in and said, is that still available? We could move our meetings to Sundays, which makes it a lot easier for our senior citizens to attend. Parking is an issue there, as you know. And if they were there in the daytime on a weekend, I don't think it would be as much as a problem, and we'd probably get a better turnout. As Larry said, that was one of our best attended events when we held it at the schoolhouse.
Yeah, it's really a quasi-township thing. So, as I say, I would suggest talking to the risk manager because it doesn't seem to me.
I'll do that tomorrow, but I know that Andrea spoke with you.
Yes, she
And she's the one who deals with outside organizations, and she said that there's no way we could do it without insurance, but I will check. You know, she said to me, she said, if this comes up tonight, just make sure they get insurance. So she specifically said that. I'll check with the risk manager. I will say, though, that there are other issues with the Millington Schoolhouse that we are going through right now. There's no heat, so that would be, particularly, as you said, there's a lot of seniors that would be extremely uncomfortable. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get the Millington Schoolhouse in shape. So, I mean, I'm not sure that this is going to happen anytime soon, if it happens at all. I believe that when she referenced us insuring groups or letting groups use it, and what she was asking you was, who were you appointed by? What she was asking was township groups are the ones that are able to use the schoolhouse. And because you are an independent group, that's why you wouldn't be covered, or that's why she hesitated. So I think the key there is that you definitely need insurance, but I will confirm that tomorrow with our risk manager and call you.
Okay.
We
But
we
in the
can waive
event-
it. There are provisions in the mill.
give a whole harmless agreement or something?
I'm just gonna have to, like I said, Andrea told me, make sure they get insurance,
Yeah.
and I
I don't want to overrule
Andrea,
Andrea.
yeah, exactly.
I don't want to do that.
So, I'm not gonna say that we can waive anything, because I need to check on that.
Okay, Ms.
I bet you have the HVAC meetings at the same time. I'm serious.
There you go.
I'm serious.
They meet at night, though.
It's funny, I mean, it used to be almost an overlapping membership between
Yes,
the
I
Historical
remember.
Society and HPAC.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has been for 11 years now.
Yeah.
They meet on Wednesday nights, though, once a month, so it's a Wednesday-Sunday thing.
Yeah.
You'd have to fight
That's
it
it.
out.
But, and also, I think we're looking at only 7 or 8
Well, that's
Sundays
it.
during the year,
And
so.
we actually would not be needing it until the new year, 2018. Right now, we only have one more meeting, and we've got it scheduled at the First Aid Squad. So hopefully your heating and air conditioning will be repaired by 2018.
Yeah, one would hope. That's on for the next meeting.
Well, good. Is this something that it appears that we can handle administratively rather than requiring any action by the Township Committee?
I think so. I mean, I think I can.
You could get us insurance?
I
You would
fully
put us-
support
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
know that I can get you insurance, but I can definitely get you answers, and, we'll figure out if we need to come back here, we'll do that.
Great,
Se-
thanks for
Seems
your
like an
help. I
appropriate
think
place for you guys to
that's a
meet, so.
Good answer.
Good, okay, so we've introduced it, and let's see where we can go from
Great.
there. We'll make-
And
we'll
thank
make
you
it
for what
work.
you do. We
Thank
we
you.
don't say that enough.
Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everybody.
much.
Lisa Lazar, Millington, New Jersey. I have 5 questions. One, on the sewerage. How is our sewer bill going to be handled? Is it going to be handled through the township or directly with New Jersey Water? How are they going to do the rate increases on it? Are they going to be allowed to do any percentage rate increase? Or is the town going to limit the rate increase?
Can I answer them
Sure, go ahead.
one at a time? So the sewer, if the referendum passes and New Jersey American takes over the system, sewer billing, once the deal closes, which would be sometime in the summer of 2018, New Jersey American would take over your sewer bill. Okay?
Like the water bill now.
Just like the water bill, and in fact, it would no longer be annual. They would divide it up into monthly payments. So you would get one New Jersey assuming you're you don't have well, and you're already a New Jersey American Water customer, you would see an additional line item on that bill for sewage every month.
Okay, but is there going to be a limit to how much it's going up? I
So-
mean,
so-
number one, it used to be $100 here. I'm now up to $650 a year. So,
So there is a committed rate structure from New Jersey American for the first 5 years, which was part of the bid requirement. We allowed, as part of the bid request, we allowed them to go 3% a year, just recognizing that they have to sink a lot of money into the system. New Jersey American as a utility does not like to do annual rate increases, because when they do a rate increase, they have to go before the Board of Public Utilities, which is a 9-month expensive process. So they only go once every 3 years, which is what they came back with. So year 1, you would see no rate increase. Year 2, you would see no rate increase. And then in year 3, you would see the accumulated 3% a year.
okay, could we be allowed to disconnect from the storage system if we wanted to?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we have no choice after this
The,
goes
the
through.
current ordinances do not provide for any disconnection from a sewer system.
Okay. The other question in regards to the storage system is, how come the rates went so far up from when Gina proposed a plan? When she proposed the plan, it was supposed to be $6 million, and now it's 25 million, I heard, 16 million.
I'm not sure which plan she proposed. The only two studies that I'm aware of were the studies that were released in 2010 from Omni Environmental and the study that we commissioned in 2017.
13.
No, 17. We did the Remington-Vernick.
Oh, I apologize.
We got it this year.
And what was the price difference between 2010 and 2000?
So there were three different options in 2010. There was a do no I&I remediation for 4 million and change. I don't remember the number exactly, but it was, I think, either 3 or 4 million and change. There was an $8 million number in there, maybe 8.3, and that was to do, I believe, 25% of the leakage. And there was a $16 million plan to do 50% of the leakage. However, that plan did not make any mention of other capital requirements for the next 20 years, like the 2017 plan does. So our 2017 plan says in 2026, you need to replace that pump over there.
I thought that was why our taxes went up in '02 in regards to repairs to the storage.
Oh,
'02.
I don't know, I have no idea what happened in '02, so I can't speak.
Okay.
I know there was a reassessment in 2000? 2000,
Could you
right?
take a look back
2001.
to '02? It was '01 or '02. We got a rate increases in our tax. It was based off of the storage system. And there was
That-
supposed
that
to be
could-
additional repairs
So there were,
on the
there were
system.
some very, I do recall that there was some very sizable tax increases in the early 2000 years. So one item of note, it wasn't until give or take, sometime between 2008 and 2011, and maybe Dennis, you might actually have a more accurate date.
You got it.
So prior to that, every taxpayer in Long Hill subsidized the sewer system users.
2011.
I think that's when it got to 100%. I think they slowly stepped up from '08 to '11. And it wasn't until around 2008 that the current township committee at that time said the sewer people should be paying for this, not the non-sewer people. So there was a gradual shift of costs out of the municipal budget to the sewer plant, to the sewer bill. That's why the sewer bill might have gone up. There were some pretty significant steps in the sewer bill over the course of those years, and that is because every taxpayer stopped subsidizing the sewer plant. And that was done, like I said, it started probably around '08 to 2011.
Now, is this going to be based on water usage, or how about the people at the swimming pool? I found out April to November, you weren't taking into sewers because
We
of the
do not.
swimming pools?
No, so the reason, so we do summer months only. We've, as far as I know of, have only done summer months. Although,
No, you don't do summer months.
sorry, my apologies, got it backwards. We don't do summer months, we do winter. So it's currently November, December, January, February, March, April.
Okay.
Those are the months that we look at, and then that's how your bill is set.
Is that how it's going to stand,
That is how
or it's
New Jersey
going
American
to-
has committed to maintaining that.
Okay, okay. I think that plan should be readjusted. I really do. I mean, when I found out about that, if you have a swimming pool and you put the pool in your backyard,
Right.
okay, when the town floods, when Sandy happened, those pools went over, they went into the storage system like no tomorrow, and basically it should be based off of usage, water usage throughout the year. I mean, that will make a difference on how I vote for it.
That is something to consider, but I mean, the main
I mean, you
reason.
got to make it fair. 12 months, everybody
Well,
pays.
the reason
that's
we,
it.
just to help you understand the motivation, the reason that we didn't do the summer months were sprinklers. People turn their sprinkler
I don't
systems
care.
on.
I have sprinklers. I don't mind paying. I think it's got to be fair across the board. So I think the township committee should take that into consideration, that if you are going to do this, it has to be 100% across the board, billed 12 months based on 12 months of water usage. Otherwise, I mean, we should have the alternative to disconnect from the sewers and put in our own septic system. And I would be more than happy to do that. Okay?
Thank you.
The other thing is, what about the 3.5% increase in taxes this year? Are we going to start now going up 3.5% each and every year?
Township Committee municipal budget, the budget that this committee
It
controls, was zero.
this one and also the school budget.
This, we don't control the school budget. You need to go
Okay.
to the Board of Education and complain about that one. We did zero. No, there was no tax increase
It
from this board
shows
this
on
year.
the website that there was a 3.5% on your side and also the school. Then take a look at it. It might be misworded.
We'll
Okay.
verify the data, but it was zero.
Okay, the other thing is, how much of our taxes go towards the school, and how much do the taxes go to the
I'm going
community?
to give that to you because I know you love that percentage.
Well, when I was mayor a few years ago, I realized that
Maybe I should.
none of us,
Maybe I shouldn't make
when I was
it to you.
when I was a small child,
All right, I'm taking it back.
62 cents on the dollar go to the public schools. There's a pie chart now on the website, as opposed to, just a numerical chart. So
Okay,
62 cents.
I was talking to Rex last week, and he said there's 2,900 houses within Long Hill Township paying taxes. And then I took, let's say 10,000. I was being conservative, very conservative.
10,000 what?
$10,000 per house for property taxes. That comes out to $29 million.
That's not our budget.
Did we ever? Yeah, it does.
This township committee collects from the taxpayer $9.5 million.
No, I'm adding both.
Okay, but.
Both.
But so again,
That's
we can't.
$29
control those,
million.
Can you, okay,
$29 million.
Understood.
Major corporations don't even make $29 million in revenue. That is a lot of money. I mean,
I do need to
A
ask you
lot.
to let someone else come up. And
okay.
if we still have
I
time
said
at the
5
end.
questions. I
That
warned
was
you.
about 7 or 8. but-
Okay. I have one other question, and this is in regards to money. I mean, you have 100 teachers, and there's like barely any students in the school. The ratios.
That is not something that this township committee is even remotely able to discuss. That is a discussion that you have to take to the Board of Education.
Well, then why do I pay all my taxes to you if I should be paying part of them to the school.
I agree with you, but the state has said we are the collecting agent, and we have to then transfer the money, I believe, twice a year, Bruce?
Yes, twice a year.
We pay the school system twice a year. That's just the way the system is. That's not something
Are
we
you
are
going
even
to
able
have
to
any
change.
answers, Bruce, to any of these questions? After you go to the meeting, you had mentioned you were going to be going to November 7th meeting.
November 13th, yes.
Okay, are you going to have any answers, or do we got to show up to the school board meeting to make a point there in regards to, because I mean, once you start looking at the big total numbers,
It's huge.
it's huge.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, Oratory Prep built a school for $7 million, and we're paying $29 million in taxes. I
Right.
mean, it's
Okay.
absurd.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But we don't control the school budgets, right? So that 62 cents out of every tax dollar is out of our control. We can't do anything about it.
So who does have control, and who can we whine at?
The school boards, and you have two school boards, right? The 62 cents is both school boards combined, right? So you have two school boards. You have the K-8 district that meets here twice a month on Mondays, and then you have the Watchung Hills district, and I don't know their meeting date, I'm sorry. Are they Monday as well?
They're on Mondays too.
Right.
Now, how much are they charging per school, per student for the high school?
I don't know, the per pupil costs. I've actually asked for that information because it was asked by one of our township committee members,
We need to move
so.
on from this because there are other people here that need to
Okay,
ask. but
okay, Mr. Mayor.
I would highly recommend that you do go to a Board of Ed meeting because those are all valid questions, and they would have better answers than we do for the education side. So,
Okay. I think I would like to also request one other thing from you. If we are going to pay that much to the school district, I think instead of the township collecting the money, that the money should go over to the school directly. This way, everything is divided out. And I would really like you to consider that, Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
so we'll take that up next
Thank you.
meeting.
State law.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, Pennsylvania did accept it. No.
Any other questions? Come on, don't be bashful.
Gary Janakis, Sterling.
I'm going to put a timer on it, 'cause I forgot the other one.
I know a couple of you guys had just attended the clean water meeting that American Water also attended. And at that meeting, a lot got discussed. I was at the one that two of you guys were at, Cornell and Guy. Was there going to be another venue where they were both going to be in the same room together, duking it out or talking about things?
They are absolutely welcome to come to the meeting on Monday,
Monday.
October 30th, 10 a.m., Town Hall.
Okay.
That's an open public meeting, and they're welcome to come.
I thought I got to
I
talk to
think
them.
they were here when was the last meeting that we were at with the young woman from Food and Water Watch, I think, was there? So they've been here, we've engaged already, so,
Okay,
I mean,
okay. I'm not able to come to every one of them. And then you were talking about a study is on the website of, for the sewer plant, possible upgrades if the township had to do things. And then, Guy, you mentioned that there's an action plan in place for what, if the sewer referendum doesn't pass, there's an action plan that you guys already have in place.
They're both on the website.
The action plan isn't on the website, or?
That's what we're going to use.
those are the action plan, right? The Omni-Environmental Plan was a study specifically done to address the sewer ban. So if we need to, and what we're talking about with the letter from the DEP is addressing the sewer ban. That is, we don't necessarily need to do the re-engineering on that. What needs to get done is 4 people on the township committee need to agree to borrow money.
So you can allocate what things get done when. Whereas if it sells, it just, someone else is doing that work of allocating and spending the money. But
Correct.
So what it kind of feels a little bit is like we've got a plan in place, and it's available on the website, but the action plan isn't being communicated to us, the public, in an effective way for us to like make a decision as to whether or not the American Waters plan, which is addressed to us and they explain it to us, and our rates are capped and all that. But we don't have the information coming from you guys that have the action plan of what has to happen, but not what's going to happen when and how much.
Here's the rub to that. So, as Jack so often points out to us, unless we sign a contract or go into a project, this township committee cannot bind a future township committee, or I think even itself,
That's right. for
to
future
make a
years.
future decision to say, we are going to spend $1 million a year like clockwork to do this, this, and this, right? We can say that with the best of intentions, but it is completely non-binding. Next year's committee could come in and say, I'm not spending $1, the heck with it, we're done, it's too much money, right? So the bottom line is we have those things. I think we all know those things need to get done. Some of us that were here in 2013 have committed to some pieces of those things, but we held off a little bit. So, I mean, you know, look, if the sewer system doesn't sell, if voters vote no, we are going to do what we always do, and that's figure out, huh?
Kick the can?
No, well, we have no,
DEP and
so we have no choice now, right? So in 2013-14, we had the luxury because COA was being disbanded, was dormant and then being disbanded by Christie, and then they went for their money grab. So the threat of COA kind of went away. We were one of how many ever towns Guy mentioned earlier, 100 something that got a letter, right? And so the pressure wasn't there, right? And at the time, judgmental decision as to whether or not you do the repairs or don't do the repairs. Now we're faced with a situation where the DEP has changed the regulations. They've become more generous. We're still over them. We're over 100%. There's only 3 towns that got a letter, so we're pressed for it. And the gift that keeps on giving, fair share housing, is back. And we had to sign an agreement. So now we have a set of restrictions on us in terms of time. There's a time limit in the fair share housing agreement as to when we have to start making progress for capacity for affordable housing, right? There's a clock that starts ticking once the deal is signed. The DEP, don't know, but I don't know if I want to gamble that if we're only one of 3, that they're going to leave us alone. I mean, they've already called us a couple of times, saying, where's, you know, what are you guys doing?
Can I just interject something? So I had a conversation today with our engineer because we did get that call from the DEP earlier this week asking where things stand. And I said to the engineer, so if this does not pass, because we were able to hold them off because they know this is a referendum. But if it doesn't pass, what happens then? And the engineer said it will probably cost about $100,000 to come up with that plan that you're talking about. So that's the first step that would have to happen, is we have to pay this consultant, who is not named yet, but probably Hawkins, since they have all the
Wait a minute, I thought we had a
expertise.
plan in place.
No,
We
I'm
have to
talking
pay
about a
for it
different
again?
plan. I don't know what it's called.
The actual action plan, right?
Oh,
So-
right.
okay.
So the, go ahead.
So that actual action plan that we would have to give to the DEP to show how we're going to come into compliance would probably cost us about $100,000 to get done, and would have to get
Right.
done, begin right after the vote if it doesn't pass.
So to give you context on that, the project that we did that we approved or the bond that we approved in 2013, and the project, which the bid came in early 14, there was about $100,000 of costs up front to create a book this thick with, okay, this is the pump you're gonna use, this is how many feet of it, this is how much wiring, right? The entire bid spec document, right? That whole engineering package, it's $100,000, give or take. Couple of
I'm
thousand.
not completely sure why, when we have a plan, we have to also pay, we have to pay for the action plan.
Because we have a plan, the Omni plan and the RNV, I'll call it the RNV plan of 2017, say these pumps are going to need to be replaced, this needs to be replaced. It isn't the actual blueprints, engineering design, load structures, calculated flow permit. They don't know what pump needs to go in there. They just know a pump needs to go in there. So the engineer has to come along, and you have to do it. It's like building a house. You
Right,
want
you
to
get
you
even
want to
more
build a
detail.
house. You know what your house looks like, but you got to hire an architect. You need an engineer to design the load-bearing walls and all that.
I know exactly what
right?
you're talking
So
about, 'cause
so
then you
that piece costs money. You can have a picture of a house and know you're going to put a house or houses there. But then once you say, okay, let's build, there's a whole bunch of work that you need to do. And that's the $100,000 that the engineer was speaking about of, okay, once we decide how much of, what we need to start doing with the DEP, what will be acceptable to them, because it's going to be a dialogue, right? They're probably not going to go along if we're going to say, oh, we're going to line another half a mile of pipe. That's probably not going to make them happy.
Well, you have a plan in place, or you have a plan,
We
just
know
not the
that,
action plan.
we know the
Oh,
things
I guess
that
the
need to
point
be
of
done.
the point of my question is a little more like, it's difficult for everyone to vote on something if they don't have the plan explained to them the way, the alternative plan explained to them the way that American Water or Clean Water has been, well, I mean, they're just talking about other ideas of what could be done. But if we have an actual plan in place, it'd be great to hear about it or have it presented in some light. So, oh, here's Plan A and here's Plan B, and it's quantified a little bit. Even though it can't be binded, I understand that.
It's there.
Yeah.
There's.
It's there, but it's not being presented, like everything else is being presented.
But I think what you're looking for is the thing that will cost $100,000 to put together.
No.
That is the step by step.
No.
I think
Yeah.
I think what you're looking for is, okay, Township Committee, what are you going to do to get out of the sewer ban? Right, or get out of the DEP flow capacity? And the short answer is, we don't know exactly.
Exactly, because you don't have
with-
that plan, yeah.
I mean, the easy answer is all of it, right?
Eventually.
We know that works. But again, we have a responsibility not to just, jump and, pick off a project that big where the DEP might be happy if we did half of it, right? So we don't know what if the referendum doesn't pass, the very first thing we have to do is have a sit-down with the DEP and negotiate with them as to what they feel would be adequate enough movement on our part to get back into compliance.
Right, to get off the list of
And
three.
the short answer is going to be the equalization tank. Because the
Which was
pipelining is
talked
just,
about a while
the pipelining is just not going to get it done fast enough.
Well, the other short answer is, what's the least expensive and gets the biggest bang from the DEP? Because there's going to be a significant hit to
Oh, yes.
the ratepayers, right?
Absolutely.
So from my perspective,
Right.
right, I want to try to minimize that as much as possible.
Absolutely.
So I want to know, all right, well, what's the biggest bang? Where's the dollar spent the best? So the DEP is gonna give us their 2 cents, before we make those commitments.
Right.
Okay.
To get they discussed it in the Omni study, right? To get to where you need to eliminate the voluntary sewer ban, you're probably looking at 50% I&I reduction. And that was the $16 million nut in 2010.
And I think, Gary, I fully appreciate where you're coming from. It's hard, right? You can't be exact. But what you can be is we know what the bid specs say, and I think it's 9% over 5 years, or 9.7% over 5 years?
It's whatever 3% compound.
So
I
we-
think
we
9.67 in year 3 and then nothing.
If the residents vote yes to sell, we know over the next 5 years after closing, it'll go up, say, 10%, make it easy, 2% per year, which is,
I heard on my Facebook page that it was going to double.
No, we're talking about if the sale goes.
Oh, okay.
If the sale goes through, right, it'll be roughly 2% a year, just like your water bill has been for 20 years. It's average 2% per year. And afterwards, the BPU becomes the regulatory body, as they are for water now, gas, electric, telecom, and everything else. If the residents vote no, we could do some simple math. We know it's $1.5 million we collect every year from residents. So whatever number we can work out with the DEP and what this committee thinks is fine. But I think it's not,
Attainable.
it's not outlandish to say it could come pretty close to doubling.
Right, what we're going to have to do is not attainable with the amount of money you're collecting now.
Oh, not a chance.
Oh,
Not a chance.
That's a
No.
break-even number. That's it, that's just to run the store, pay the people that work.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
the best word to use, and thank you, Jack, is it's operational. We charge what it costs to run that thing. So anything we've discussed tonight is incremental.
Right, so whatever we do, that cost if we keep it, that cost goes back to the sewer rate payer. Now, there are obviously some that you can finance, right? Or you can pay as you go, or you can do a combination of both, right? The challenge with financing is it needs 4 people to say yes, right? So as
Four
Go-
people with guns to their heads are the same as 5 people with guns to their heads.
Possibly,
Well said.
quite possibly, I would hope so, but, you're right. Guy mentioned that the plan in 2010 failed 3-2.
It was the expansion tank.
3 people said yes.
It was the
Yeah,
expansion tank?
right. 3 people
No,
said yes.
Actually, for the full boat,
For the
$16
full
million.
boat.
Oh,
No, I think they voted on 8. They chose the middle one. I think it was the middle one. But in either case, the vote was 3 yes, 2 no. Sounds like a win. Project failed because they couldn't get the money to pay for it. And nobody wanted to go out on a limb and do a rate increase like that chart that we showed you goes. But guess what? If 4 people here don't vote to borrow, and we have to do the repairs,
then it
and
goes to the
we
rate.
could potentially have 3 people saying yes due to repairs, not enough votes to bond, and, well, guess what? Then we're going to have to charge the sewer rate payer outright. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know what the committee looks like next year. You could have people just completely averse to borrowing money. I don't know. So we can't commit to that now, right?
Right, you can't.
But even if you borrow, right, if you borrow, and I say this only because I ran these numbers, if you borrow $6 million for 10 years, you're looking at a 48% rate increase to pay that debt. If you do nothing else except borrow $6 million to do some stuff,
Is that,
decide what stuff you want to do,
is that rate increase across, as you made the distinction earlier this evening, that it's just on the sewer people now?
That
but
is
it used
just
to
on
be-
the sewer
It used to be
people.
spread across the township.
right, but
But the issue with the DEP is it going to be impacting the township completely? So now you're going to have just the sewer people possibly paying to keep the township out of trouble?
the sewer people are the only ones using it.
But the township could be, the entire township, even the people on septic, could be held accountable. by-
For a fine, yes,
Yes.
yes.
I'm speaking out of school because I don't know what the township committee will look like next year, whether it's, same or any changes. But I can almost guarantee you, there's no way any rational person is going to put this township in a position where it's going to be fined by the DEP. It's just not going to happen. That would be unconscionable.
Of course not, we're gonna work together. All right, thank you.
All right, you're welcome, Gary. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Any other questions?
Well, Guy, I think you asked me to come tonight, so I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I read
You
the
were there when
newspaper.
I invited him.
For the record, your name, please.
Kathy O'Leary from Millington.
Kathy with a K?
Yes. The only way to spell it. I'll try to make this quick. First of all, the TIFA, there's an actual mutual consent decree that's been signed between the DEP and it's called Prism Millington LLC or Millington Prism LLC. I forgot exactly which. And that particular consent decree, and I honestly haven't read the whole thing yet. I think my husband has. But yeah, I haven't gotten the briefing yet. So, but it does, I think it does allow them to create two LLCs, one for the mound and one for the rest of the property. So, and there's some money that has to go into escrow and all this kind of stuff.
But the DEP can't authorize a subdivision.
True. True. So, but as long as we make sure that we have that ordinance, but how do we're going to create an ordinance just for the Tifa property?
It's an affordable housing site, so it's going to have
So
its
all the
own-
affordable housing sites are not going to be subdividable?
I did say that. But any property that wants to subdivide has to come before the planning board.
Okay. And just, I mean, there's comments too about the school enrollment, and it's in the documents that Topology and the Morris County Economic Development put out, and there was something on the Facebook page. I posted there. I went to both meetings, talked about it at both meetings. Our enrollment's not going down. Our enrollment's going up. So.
This year, I believe it went up.
No. It's been going up for years. It's been going up for years.
Could be.
So, well, I think that.
So what is the enrollment this year?
The enrollment, well, if you need to look at what the younger classes are, but since the current fourth grade has entered the school, the enrollment has been going up.
Right,
And
but
we have actually
it's
5
really the
class
replacement of
sections.
kindergartners that you look at, is the entering kindergartners
Right.
as the eighth graders graduate.
Right.
So what is the kindergarten size compared to the eighth grade size?
The kindergarten size is 100 students. There's 5 sections.
And what is the
When my
eighth-
son was in kindergarten, there were 3 sections.
Right, so what's the eighth grade size?
The 8th grade, I think the 7th grade is the smallest grade that we have. It's like 60 kids, something like that. But don't quote me on this.
Right.
But the enrollment is going up.
Right, it's from what I understand, the enrollment has plateaued. You know, I think we're at like 850 or something like that.
But you can't look at the total number. You need to look at the trend.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So over the past 5 years, we've had declining enrollment because the replacement class of kindergarten is smaller than the graduating class of 8th graders. But now we've had, with St. Vincent's closing and some population changes, we're actually starting to plateau out, and with luck, we'll see it continue to grow.
Okay.
Our schools are designed for 1,200, 1,300 kids,
No,
something
they're
like
not.
that. Yeah, they
No,
are.
they're not.
They are. If you read the
No.
demographics,
If you look at the,
if you read the demographic
I
study from
did.
2013,
I did.
it clearly states
I did, and I
12
hope
to
you're not
1,300
using my 3
kids.
minutes to talk over me. I did read it, and it says that we could fit 1,200 kids in there, but if we take away the special ed classrooms, if we take away the music room, if we take away the art rooms, if we take away the Spanish rooms, and we take away the computer labs.
Right. So school is configured a certain way based on what the administration feels is the most appropriate for the classes that they have. If we rise up to 1,200, which would be amazing if that happened. Not in a good way, to be honest with you. But if we rise up to 1,200, we wouldn't need additional space.
If we rise up to 1,200, it wouldn't be a very pleasant environment for the children who are at that school. And if we value our schools in terms of what our property values are, I think we wouldn't necessarily want to get there unless we have a plan to expand the schools, which right now our master plan does not account for that.
Right, but the
And
expansion of schools is not the township committee's responsibility, it's the school boards.
Didn't we just do an expansion of schools like
About
11 years ago?
Yeah, 11 years ago, something like that.
Yep.
And then,
that's what raised it up to 12 to 1,300.
And then like 5 years ago, there was buzz around talking around closing one of them,
Yeah, there was some
right?
discussion.
So,
That was 5 years ago.
no, I understand
Things
that, right?
change.
But it.
And I
it-
would hope you would talk to the school board about, what's going on right now in Gillette School.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it, but
Okay.
the fact is
You are the
that-
liaison, right?
Yeah, and the fact
Okay.
is,
And they're not talking about the fact that they've had to add class sections, and you're not having that conversation about how Gillette School is?
I talk to them all the time.
Okay.
I mean, I don't talk to the administration about what they're doing with class sections. That's their responsibility to administer the schools.
Right, but planning board and planning is part of,
But the school is not required to come before the planning board. Oh,
You need to take a quick time out.
Yeah,
He has to change the battery.
all right. So the school's not required to come to the planning board to get their plans approved, right, if they want to expand the schools. They do it as a courtesy. We did, as a matter of fact, years ago, if I recall, but they're not required to do it, right? But, I'm happy to go and talk to them about whatever they'd like to talk about, and just recently I got invited, apparently. So I'm going to be there on November 13th. So, we can't control what the schools do.
oh, and I'm not suggesting you do. I'm not suggesting that you do. I'm just suggesting that when we are making assumptions about or planning for the future of our town, that we shouldn't be planning around assumptions that we have all this room in the schools
But we
if
do.
we don't talk to the schools.
We do have room in the schools.
Okay, but you
If
said
we
you said
added
talk to the
100
schools.
kids, would we be at capacity in
I
that
think-
schools? If we added
I'm sorry?
200 kids, would we be at capacity in those
I
schools?
think you should talk to. I think you should talk to the current fourth graders, the moms of the current fourth graders, the moms of the current third graders, the moms of the current second graders, the moms of the current kindergartners, and they were before the school board complaining about class size, because class sizes in those lower grades have risen to over 20, like 22, 23, approaching
Right,
24 and
But
25.
you're talking to us about an administrative decision that we have no control over. I can't go to the school board and say, make the class sizes smaller.
I'm not telling you that. I'm not telling you that. I'm just saying that when you are making assumptions and decisions and planning and doing our master plan, that they should be based on actual reality, right? It should be based on reality and the trend,
Right.
as opposed to you put out a document. A document was put out.
The master
that-
plan is also the planning board, right? So we don't get to do
And
that,
but you also, you happen to, this was not what I was going to talk about. You also repeated that here tonight, that this is, and I'm trying to say that this is not the case, and you need to investigate it. That's all.
I'm not sure what you're driving at. I mean, there's capacity in our schools.
Okay.
If we put more kids in the schools, they would easily fit.
All right.
Now, whether they add teachers and sections and stuff, that's up to them.
And again, if you read that demographic study, the demographic studies, yes, we can fit more kids in it, but all these things that really would be not pleasant for the children who attend the school would have to happen. And that was one of the study when you
I'm
talk.
sure the administration would take that into consideration to make it pleasant.
Okay.
I mean,
Forget it. Well, let's move on, because you're whatever.
I have, my son was in 7th grade. You mentioned the small class size. My
Yes.
son is in 7th.
Okay.
And his class size was about half of that of his older brother. So I don't know where we are on that chart now, and I think my oldest was one of the larger years. So, you
Yeah,
know,
it's changing. There's no question it's changing.
You know, so my oldest was in a 120, 125-ish.
And I understand the
So-
school is going to commission a new demographic study next year.
Yes, they are.
Because they have, by law, they have to do it every
Right.
5 years. So we'll know in 2018 what the projections are.
But they should work with, that should be considered in the master plan.
Yes, thank you. That's all I wanted to say. And then in terms of the letter from the DEP, I mean, I've never referred to it as a mythical letter. I don't think anybody who came to the Food and Water Watch meetings referred to it as a mythical letter. We know it's a real letter. I've seen it, I've read it. There is for the last 3 months, there was a report that was sent to the DEP, and Tom Sweeney signed off on it, and it was prepared by Kevin Lynn, and it said that we were 200,000 gallons 200,000 gallons under our capacity for the last 3 months. Now,
Kevin resigned. He doesn't work, he retired in July, I think. At least.
Well, whatever it was,
there was a
yeah.
report that was that was completed, and Tom Sweeney signed off on it, and it was filed with the DEP for the last 3 months.
The DEP hasn't sent us a letter recently saying, hey, you're off the hook now.
But that's not what, and again,
There-
I'm just saying that, you referred to it as a mythical letter, and that it was based on, no, Matt,
think you did.
Matt said
Matt
it was based on hearsay, so I'm just responding to what you said.
The letter, though, is quite clear. The DEP looks at a 12-month average of data, not 3.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, no, and I
it-
thank you for, you clarified that today
it
with
is-
me, and I appreciate
right.
that.
And the DEP website is great. It's actually it's an interactive tool that you can actually query any specific date periods. I did do from July or August, and I got results that were nowhere near what you said. So what my suspicion actually is that some of the recent data that we've submitted actually has not been populated into the database yet. Because if those numbers
there was
are
that.
accurate, then my August number should have dropped when I went to October, but instead it went up. So I'm not sure what's up with that. But
No,
I'm
no,
just
yeah,
going
those-
by the data
yeah.
off the DEP site.
Yeah, the state, whatever the state databases are, they're usually, I'm surprised that there's only a 3-month lag time. And I really wish that you would clarify, and I don't necessarily expect you to do it here, but we've had multiple conversations about the rates and how there's 2 different charts. And there's the one chart with the gently sloping line. And Cornell, you've corrected this a number of times at the wastewater meetings, but you don't, on the meetings that we have where we're recording and, and it's on TV, we don't talk about it.
I can do it now for you. So both of those rate charts assume one thing. Only the cost of the Remington-Vernick study of 2017, the 20-year capital plan. Both of those charts, that's the expenses that they're talking about. Neither of those 2 charts do anything for an immediate relief of the sewer ban or COA obligation, because we're not sure exactly how much the DEP is going to want us to do or not do. We have an idea, but so everything we're talking about in both of those charts are on top of the lines that are there. The first chart that you saw, which was the little gradual line, assumed we're going to borrow $1.4 million a year forever, basically, right? So instead of trying to figure out how to pay for it up front, we've got operational stuff to do, and we're going to borrow $1.4 million every year, and we're going to keep paying it off. It's kind of like doing a mortgage on your house every year and, doing an extension and adding on and on and on. Eventually, that catches up to you. You saw how the chart went up at the end. The thing to keep in mind with that chart is that chart continues for another 10 more years without doing any additional work, because it's all borrowed money. And the money that you're borrowing in the latter half of that chart is still getting repaid another 10 years out. That wasn't even on that picture. The second more dramatic chart, which is the chart that's on the website, is an assumption of doing the work that Remington Vernick specified in the years that it's specified and paying for it out of our pocket, no borrowing money. Okay, so now, which one you're going to get? Again, can't bind a future committee, can't tell you. It could be a hybrid. We could get a committee that refuses to bond but gets 3 people that want to do the work, and then you're forced into that big chart because I can't borrow. That means I have to pay for it right away, right, with the sewer rates. Or there could be a change in discussion in the future, quite frankly, that the future committee might decide to start reburdening the taxpayers. Not suggesting anybody go that way. I'm a believer that I used a sewer system, I should pay for it. My neighbor's got a septic, they shouldn't, but that's me. So someplace in between those two, or anywhere on either end, is where the chart could be. I mean, you can, the numbers of what we need to spend are there, and just throw it into a mortgage calculator and you can figure out what the debt service is going to be. Like I said, if we just borrow $6 million, right, just the debt service would cause the rates to go up 48%.
And that, you're assuming 2%?
I think I assumed 3. No, I think I assumed 3. I have to take a look at my spreadsheet, what I did. I can double check what I did. It wasn't, I don't think it was the NJEIT number.
Okay.
But I don't think it was that extraordinary either, because I know we just bonded at like 3% and change because we've got a pretty good rate. And by the way, clarification, the NJEIT number I think is 1 to 2% above prime. It was 1 to 2% when we did it because prime was at the floor. And actually, I think when we borrowed in 2013, the interest rate might have been 0 from the federal government. So it's 1 to 2% above prime.
So when you came to our meeting and you said we could
Well,
borrow
I said,
1
when
to
I corrected
2%?
them downward and I said 1 to 2%,
Right, then you said 2 to 4.
it's actually 1 to 2% above prime,
Okay,
which right now is probably, 1.5 to 2.5%.
fine.
It's the government rate.
All right, and neither of those numbers takes into account whenever we move to rate consolidation and we move to Lakewood's rates.
No, I was just talking about the borrowing rate if we borrowed money.
Neither of
in the
those,
NJE.
yeah, so neither of those charts take into account.
Well, that's our chart. If that's so those two charts.
Well,
sorry,
both of them
the
have
blue
New Jersey
line-
American Water's, there's a line for us, the blue line, and then the red line is New Jersey American Water's line. So we're both represented on both charts. So the bottom line, on neither bottom line, which is New Jersey American Water's line, are not what we should take into consideration.
Okay, so if I understand, your question is the New Jersey American rate chart line inclusive of any potential increases to bring us in line with Lakewood?
Yes.
Lakewood rate structure.
Right, because
And
we're
I'm
going to be.
getting an up and down nod from Nicholas in the back saying, yes, it is.
Okay. You can show you, I'll come on the 30th, you can show me where it is.
That's what you were getting at?
Yeah, because between our rates and Lakewood's rates,
Yep.
there's at least 25% currently. So if
Yep.
there's a 20, I didn't see
Right.
where there was a 25%
Right.
jump in
Yeah,
that lower line.
The thing to keep in mind, and I think you guys mentioned it once at one of our meetings, there's another town that they acquired a number of years back, like 11 or 12 or maybe even longer, that was also below their Lakewood rate, and they're still not there yet in terms of, because they're stepping them up so slowly.
No, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. That's not the way consolidation works. consolidation works that as soon as they get enough ratepayers and they can make a case before the BPU to have one statewide rate, they have one statewide rate. And at that point, then we have, New Jersey American Water has said that they've created a statewide rate model based on Lakewood's rates. Today, as we stand, well, it depends upon which number you use. If we use Food and Water Watch's numbers, that they say our average is 560 a year. I think you had thrown out a number that we are 430 average sewer rate a year. So depending on which number you use, it's, if it's like Food and Water Watch's number, it's 25%. If it's your number, it's 30 plus. So there, whenever that happens, we're going to have a big jump in our rates.
So ours is 400 something average today.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the New Jersey American Lakewood average was the 500 something number. And he's, again, nodding his head up and down. I can get him up here and let him to speak to that if you want, but,
No,
and that is, at some point over time, yes, the goal is that everyone in New Jersey is going to be on the same tariff plan, which would bring us from our 440 to 5 whatever. And my comment was that they've had another municipality that they've done this to, and after 11 or 12 years, they still haven't brought them in line.
But they can't do it. It's not.
But-
That's not how consolidation works. So I appreciate you giving me that information, but
they're doing it today.
not technically, no. They're doing some kind of internal accounting, and I appreciate that they're doing some kind of internal. And Dennis was gracious enough to explain it to me. So, but rate consolidation before the BPU works differently. It's you get to make one ratepayer case for the entire state, which is what they get to do for water, because they have so many water customers.
Correct.
So they don't have that many. They have 65,000 sewer customers today, which is not enough to have a single ratepayer case. So, anyhow, so I think you guys, and Cornell and Guy, you've come to a couple of our meetings. But we've had like 100 people come through the meetings that we've had with Food and Water Watch. And I think the number one question is like, why so little money? My question is the 95%, is that condition that we sewer 95% of the town, one of the things that's bringing down the number between the 25 and the 11?
I would suspect absolutely it is, yes. So we put a number of conditions into the agreement, or into the bid request document, or requirements, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
One was extending service coverage by 7%. That has a cost associated with it that we kind of knew was going to impact the price. We asked them to take a look at our employees. That, not sure to what degree, but that could have impacted the price. We asked them to upfront within 2 years repair/replace 2 pumping stations. Those were the only 2 specific capital items that we gave them. So that, I'm sure, drove down the price. We asked them to get us out of the sewer ban within 5 years. That has a cost associated with it. I'm sure that impacted the price. And what else did we ask them for?
Did you say COA, Rick?
Oh, COA, I did not say COA, and we asked them to ensure that they can provide enough capacity to meet anything, well, I think the number was, I think we gave them 110,000 gallons a day rather than,
Correct. Which our engineer calculated.
which our engineer,
Context
you're
of COA.
right.
Which would only be 20,000 gallons a day if you built the 54 units and not the 300.
Correct.
Not allowed
But
an
the-
outside
but-
contractor to come in.
But the
developer to come in.
agreements today that Fair Share signed off on calls for 350 general units with 54 affordable.
But I don't think they care about the 350 units. They care
Yes,
about
they
the
did.
54.
Fair Share was not going to let go of the Tifa property. Full stop. Fair
They
Share
don't care. They care whether or
They-
not Tifa
they-
gets
well-
developed with 138 units, or
No,
they
let
care
me-
whether or not there's 54 units
Let
developed.
me rephrase. Fair Share was visited by Prism.
Mm-hmm.
and Prism gave them their plan. I would imagine that the only way we could have taken that property off the table for Prism was if we somehow managed to get in between an existing contract of sale with the seller, purchase the property, and committed to purchasing and funding the construction of as part of that fair share agreement.
And you're telling me that Fair Share cares about 100 market rate
No.
units?
Fair share cares about 54.
Okay.
But unless the township was willing to put its money where its mouth is
Well, we've had
in the
conversations
agreement-
about that.
We have, but we don't have any firm contracted sources for funding at this point in time. And that came very late, those opportunities came very late in the game for us.
All right, but, okay. And I was here a year ago, over a year ago, talking about that kind of thing. And I'm sorry to do this to you, but you laughed at me, literally. Because you just were assuming that there was no other way other than do this as a market rate, as a market rate. But there's a lot of towns around, like Summit doesn't do that. Summit, they do some of it, but they also build their own units, and they have ways of doing that.
We did, Lounsbury Meadow, we built and paid for.
Okay.
We have, the township has done it also, and they had a bond for it.
And we sold half of our obligation to Newark.
Right.
And we,
RCAs.
okay, and you can't do an RCA anymore.
No,
I agree.
no, we cannot.
Right,
I think
but-
we did get to apply some outstanding.
We still have credits
We still
left
have
over.
credits that we're able to apply towards our
From prior
obligation.
RCAs.
So
Anyway,
there's- again,
it's
that's
diverging from the
sideshow.
topic. So
So, wait a minute. So-
those were requirements that we put into the bid document. All of those requirements cost money.
Mm-hmm.
So the same way you go looking at a used car whose book value is $10,000, and you need a new engine, new tires, new brakes, and a transmission swap, you're probably not going to pay 10 grand for that car. You're going to take off the
And
cost
I hate,
of
I'm sorry,
what
I hate
you're
the used car
gonna-
analogy. It's the worst analogy ever.
All right, a house,
Okay.
right? If the house
Because it's an
neighborhood.
asset, that it does,
Fine,
it's
a
an
house,
asset.
right?
And it's revenue.
If a particular neighborhood in town is calling for $600,000 homes, but the home is 45 years old and the owner never did a stitch of work on it in 45 years, they're probably not going to get 600. The house is going to be discounted. You always, when you shop, and I'm sure you do this, if you shop for anything that you're buying that isn't brand new out of the shrink wrap, you're going to discount or only pay what you think is a fair market value, less what you think it's going to cost to make it nice.
Right, and we threw in all these other things, including the 95% of the township sewer, which is really expensive.
Yes, we did.
I mean, we ran the numbers for you at the last meeting we were at about how much it's going to cost to
I
hook up
think
this dry line.
Remington Vernick, I believe, said it would be between $4 and $6 million. I believe that was in the.
Well, no, they
engineering
said
study.
for 12,000 linear feet, which is 2.3 miles, is, I forget what the number was, but it calculated out to be between 1.4 and 1.7 million dollars per mile. And it's really not about like the mile of pipe, it's like the mile of pipe and then how many ratepayers you can put on that pipe, right? As to whether or not there's a return on the investment. So we're talking about the dry line. The dry line is going to cost, it's about between 4/10 and half a mile to hook up the dry line that's on Fenview that keeps coming up in conversation about being like I don't know if it's a priority or if it's just something that seems to be like a logical option, but the number of ratepayers that we would end up hooking up, it would be $30,000 per ratepayer, and then it would take 50 years to pay that back based on a rate of $500 a year.
That's math that the buyer has to worry about, honestly.
Well, that's okay, and that's part of the. I think that's part of the. That's part of the attitude.
So we had a number of meetings where we had a public discussion about what requirements should go in. And, you know, it was the consensus of the committee that if you're going to put this up for sale and you're going to give the keys to someone, do you have any last requests, right? So I'm pretty sure people probably wouldn't have been happy, those 12% that aren't sewered, might not have been happy with us if we sold the system without thinking about them, right? Because how do they ever get connected? They might
Well,
never
New Jersey American
get-
Water, if it made fiscal sense, the same way if it made fiscal sense for the town to do it, the town would have done it. So if it makes fiscal sense for New Jersey American
that-
Water to do it, but that's kind of what we're going to be faced with going forward.
That discussion was back then, and
Right.
it was in the bid document, and New Jersey American responded to it.
Okay. So and go back to our master plan. Our master plan from 1996 says, and that's still an effective document, correct? So our master plan from 1996 says there should be no further expansion of the plant, or that discourages it. Discourages further expansion of the plant, discourages expansion of the sewer main. So are we superseding the master plan here when we sell the system and we put all this stuff into the bid document?
So we have no choice as far as affordable housing goes. Affordable housing throws, as I'm sure you're well aware, can throw out all ordinances on the books. They can basically do, if you're subject to a build a remedy suit, they can
But
basically
that
do
doesn't
whatever
change
they want.
the expansion of the sewer main.
That does not do the expansion of the sewer main. no.
So when you put the 95% in, that has nothing to do with the affordable housing. Because the affordable housing properties are already on sewer properties.
Affordable housing is not necessarily on sewered housing.
But
The
that was the-
Tifa has a connection, the
planning
Warren
board.
Avenue property has a connection, the
Gillette doesn't.
thermoplastics has, that's the only one.
That was the planning board 21 years ago, but it was always the township's intent prior to that and after that to sewer as much of the town as they could. And they went through various sections of town.
Okay, so, sewer promotes sprawl. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why they put it in there in the first place. The Association of the New Jersey Environmental Commissions published a document that said that if when you start putting sewer in, that increases density, it increases lot coverage, it makes smaller lot sizes, it increases traffic. So none of these are good necessarily for our town, maybe why it was in the master plan.
But the areas of town that aren't sewered can't be built on at high density. The reason that sewers weren't extended there was such low density, but most of them are in Myersville, where there are environmental constraints.
Right, but we don't have to extend the sewer
It's
to
for the-
95% of the town.
It's for the people that are there. It's not to encourage new
It's
development. and
95% of the customers.
It's not practical to have new development in Myersville because they can't do it anyway.
It's the 95% is of the homes today, not a geographical 95%.
And there's nothing keeping the ordinances from changing or higher density development to come in at that point once you
Again,
have sewer.
A future committee can change any ordinance they want.
But they really can't in Myersville. You couldn't have high-density
Well,
construction in
aside from
Myersville, and that's where
Right.
most of the people that aren't sewered are, because the rest of the town is pretty much sewered.
you're moving on to a different
Yeah.
discussion
Well,
already
just-
about, yeah.
Yeah.
The-
So we don't have the I understand, is the utilities element of the master plan written?
Not revised. Dennis, utility? It's not-
Utilities has been discussed this year, but it hasn't been formally introduced for approval.
And who's writing that?
Master Plan Committee.
But it gets adopted by the
And-
planning
and
board.
at
But it-
this-
right.
And just to finish the story, at this point, the sewer language is floating pending a referendum decision. There's no point in the master plan recommending going in one direction if the referendum says we have to go in a different direction. So that whole document has not been introduced formally for approval pending a reasonable decision by the voters as to what they'd like to have happen, which is, of course, what we always preach about the master plan, is we should get the input from the voters.
So we don't have anybody assigned to writing the utilities element of the master plan?
Yes, there are one or two members of the master plan committee who have been assigned to write it.
Mhm.
I don't know offhand, I don't carry around the roster and all the assignments for the umpteen different elements.
No, I tuned in, I tuned into one of the planning board meetings and I thought I heard something about Mike Malloy writing the plan, the utilities element for the master plan, is that correct? Or did I hear something? I thought I heard, I tuned in, I was going through the video of one of the master plan, the planning board committee, planning board meetings, and I thought I heard something about Mike Malloy writing the utilities element of the master
He
plan.
might very well, but remember that regardless of who the author is, it has to be sanitized by the entire committee, approved by the entire committee, passed on to the master plan, or passed on to the planning board, discussed by the planning board, and then introduced for a public hearing by the planning board before it becomes official. So you can't point to any one person by name and saying he's writing it. Lord
Okay.
knows there'll be enough additional fingers in the pot before it gets approved.
And we're just gonna wait to see what the referendum comes out with, and then we're gonna write the utilities element? Well, it's moot point, isn't it, after if everybody votes yes, it's a moot point, correct? There's nothing for us to plan, it's out of our hands. What is there for us to plan?
I'm sorry?
What is there for us to plan?
As far as the utility element?
Yes.
Well, there are other utility elements that we can be concerned about.
I didn't see anything else about utilities other than the sewer in the 1996 plan, so maybe I missed it.
Didn't we
Wait,
discuss?
Did I miss it?
The township had a non-binding referendum back in the early 70s or late 60s, I believe, and the town voted to fund the construction and the expansion of the sewer system through general taxation at the time. And at that time, the plan was to sewer the entire town, and these people paid all those years through general revenues for the sewer system, and they never received their connections. So that was the purpose. Was, as the mayor said, it's for existing customers, 95% of existing customers.
So those people are people that have been here since the 70s that you're now trying to accommodate?
Maybe not them, but their predecessors in title.
But we don't have any control over that. Whatever gets sewer is entirely a
That is
calculation for New Jersey American Water.
Correct.
Okay, so there's no way that we could ever consider that we're repaying those people.
Well, but they're,
I'm not repaying them. Some of them
Yeah.
are getting connections that were promised to them 40 years ago.
Right, but we
Maybe
can't,
it's not the same
you can't say that. It's not a claim that you can make.
No, we can't, but we also, by the same token, we were also unable to make any specific recommendations about a particular area because we have no understanding of the geology of particular regions and the difficulty of going, over a mountain, under a mountain, around a swamp, whatever the case may be. So that we came up with a reasonable, what we felt to be a reasonable percentage, and we discussed it in public. I mean, we bounced around 90%, we bounced around 95%, we bounced around doing everybody. I mean, you got testy with me.
Do you need a puppy?
So, you know, we thought 95% and let them figure it out, because if it's their system and they have engineers that do this sort of thing, you know, that's one study I don't think any of us wanted to pay to try and figure out as to which particular house might have made sense or shouldn't have made sense. So that, I mean, that's
And
the only.
I don't disagree with how you wrote the bid, but I'm just saying, like, the reality that we're in right now, if we say yes to New Jersey American Water, it's completely out of our hands. Like you said, you hand over the keys, and we
Correct.
never, ever, ever, ever get the keys back.
It would be near to impossible to get the keys back, correct? Which
Right.
is why we could, you know, this committee and the wastewater committee tried to consider everything that we might ever need or want, and what was worth putting into that document.
And the keys can go, just so people are clear, that the keys can go to somebody else too. They don't have to stay with New Jersey American Water because they're the owner of the system.
That is correct. They could
still be a regulated
they could
utility.
resell it, but it would still be to a regulated utility, and, you know, although,
Some are
I
better
mean,
than others.
some are better than others, correct?
I would only point out, NJ American Water has owned the water system in this town for 110 years, long before anybody who works for NJ American Water was
Right.
alive. I don't think that's the intent.
It is possible.
It's possible.
It is
It's
possible.
entirely possible. They've had more than one owner in the last 10
Yep.
years, so they've
possible.
had several CEOs in the last 10 years, so.
Corporate acquisitions, corporate takeovers, absolutely.
And anybody who shops at Whole Foods knows that
We have-
things can
we-
change.
Which is why, which is why we've said the BPU is our friend and rate council.
Okay.
They're the ones that protect us.
Okay. And we have a difference of opinion about that too. Because as I've said before, I've had dealings with the BPU. So, and it was a very difficult thing. We had to enlist the help of two NYU law students who spent their entire semester working on a petition for the BPU, and then it was just overturned by the FEC, I think it was. So, but that's whatever. And I just want to say that to look at this, you're going to get a pot of money, which is great for the town, I suppose, in the short term. But while the municipality is going to get a pot of money, the ratepayers are the ones who are going to have to pay that back.
A lot of money's not sticking around. It's going in one pocket and out the other because.
Well, okay, so it's going to pay off. It's going to pay off our debt. Okay, and there's more pots of money coming probably from the developments that are in town with, you know, not negotiations on pilots, which are, I'm sure, are forthcoming, because if you look at everybody else who's dealing with these same developers in the surrounding towns, that's what they're negotiating. So, which is another thing that I hope the school talks to you about. But thank you. I really appreciate the time you gave me.
Thank you.
I thank you. You have come to every meeting, and I hopefully speak for everybody here. We appreciate it. It's not
Thank
easy
you.
to do what you're doing, so thank you.
Oh, and I want to thank you tonight too, because I heard a lot of information that I haven't been hearing about this 8 million versus the 16 million versus the 26 million.
It's all up there.
And I
all on
have
the
to
website.
say, you shot yourself in the foot, guy, because
I wonder what that
in July when you had that meeting and you were like, it's madness. So when you go and you have use this, and I'm sure that the rest of your committee here has told you this, when you use this hyperbolic language, it just irritates people
To be
and gets
fair,
people
Liz Allen
suspicious.
Parker, I blame him. That quote was from a much longer quote. What I said was.
No, I watched the whole meeting. It's not his quote.
I said no. I definitely said it.
Yeah.
But I said I've had 3 years to consider all alternatives,
Mm-hmm.
and I've decided it would be madness not to sell. You, I said to the public, must now educate yourself as well with our help, and you make your decision. So granted, they took one quote. It's a nice quote. It plays well. If I could use a different word, perhaps I would.
Snippets always make great headlines.
Yes.
So. Thank you.
I can't undo what I said.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I just have some quick.
You guys have sat in the back the whole night and
I
listened
know,
to this. You have
really?
no
Nothing?
questions?
Nothing? We answered it all? Okay. Okay.
Do we have a plan in place for people that have to hook up and can't afford it?
This came up,
Yeah.
this came up once
In fact,
before.
Gary. Oh, now you wake up.
Well, I know New Jersey Americans they only have to pay from what, their house to the main line.
Yes.
But what's, like, say, I don't know how much that costs, but let's say for somebody that's on a fixed income or a senior or just can't make ends meet right now and they have to hook up, do we have anything to help these people out?
I think the suggestion was we can look at something as a committee. I mean, we can't bind everyone on the committee, but perhaps we would look at something, right, Mayor, where we would say 10%, 20%, set aside a certain amount of money for those that might need a, low or no interest loan for 10 years.
Well, let's ask the first question, Jack. Is it legally possible to set
To create a fund?
a trust?
I don't believe so, but I believe the state has funds, or programs, I should say, to deal with
So
this.
we can't put money, I know not from the 11 million, right? Because that statutorily has to go into pay down debt. But there is the $250,000 transaction fee.
Right.
That we received, right? And that was, its intention was to cover all the lawyers and everything else. Can that be earmarked, if you will, for parameters to be determined, someone who's got
I guess we could set up a
financial
program, but I
difficulty.
don't think we could set aside that money for that purpose. Now, the other thing to remember is they're no longer going to have the $10,000 connection fee.
No, understood, but I mean, the thought is, right, and we don't expect, honestly, I think the back of the napkin we didn't expect too much, right? Because 7% is what, 200 homes we're talking about in Long Hill that might get sewer connected? And, if you think about Long Hill with a median average income of $111,000 a year, I'm going to assume that maybe only 10% of those people, maybe 20 people might need some help because they can't afford $4,000, right? Seniors on a fixed income, Social Security hasn't exactly been kind, that type of thing. So, I mean, if you do the math, 20,000 at, $3,000 or $4,000, you're looking $60,000 to $80,000 that you're talking about putting someplace as a, hey, okay, if you, and again, we have to figure out the mechanics of it. How do you demonstrate the need? Title lien, that type of stuff. But I assume that those things can be figured out. But can we, I mean, I suppose any future committee can undo it.
Right.
Right? But could we say, hey, if the sale goes through, we're gonna put X into this box over here and leave it there?
I don't think we can do that. As I say, I think you could create a program to assist people, but I don't think you could take that transaction money and segregate it to a designated trust fund like that.
You're such a party pooper, you know that?
Since
I mean, there may be a way to do it. It's never come up, but I don't think you can.
Since this was something that I brought up a couple weeks ago, I just wanted to be clear, and I know whatever you guys talk about won't be binding to the next committee or whatever, and you can't do that, but I just want to be clear that it's not going to be the people who are already hooked to the sewer now paying for people who aren't hooked to the sewer to be able to get hooked to the sewer.
No, it's not, I mean, we're not talking about a paying for scenario. What we were discussing was, you have a senior citizen who's on a fixed Social Security income,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Can't afford an immediate $4,000 hit, right, to get connected, but they have to connect, right? So we loan them $4,000, whether that's interest-free, whether that's 2%, I'm forget about.
I'm just wondering who we is. We, the
The
township?
Township.
Okay.
The township, right? So the township,
My tax money.
The township is getting an, well,
That's
we're
what
having,
I'm wondering.
we're having
Who-
a discussion,
Yeah.
that's all.
It's not with his tax money, it's gonna not be from the sewer payers, who are only the people who are hooked to the sewer now, because the other people aren't paying for the sewer, because they've got their private systems. So it's just a matter of like, who is paying for it? I guess that's what you gotta be
Well,
careful. And it's too late to get into the complete flushing out of this issue.
wow, good one, good
Yeah, but
one,
to the mayor's
good one.
But to the mayor's point, and I think Jack said, I don't know if you could do that, where if you make it a lien upon sale, so if the house sells for
Right, so the money comes
$100,000,
on the closing, yeah.
yeah, that is paid for by the property owner, ultimately. So that,
Yeah, it
we've done that.
it wasn't meant to be a
grant.
a grant. It was meant to be
A way to.
okay,
help them
here's,
figure it out.
okay, you
A
know,
way for them to figure it out.
a way for them to figure it out, payment plan, maybe it's when title transfers, right? For any reason, right? Even if it transfers for $1, you gotta pay back the, Yeah.
Well, they would have to if we had a lien on it.
yeah.
No title company's going to allow the lien to remain after the sale.
Yeah, I don't know if is anybody into that mechanics and we figure it out?
that
or-
part I think makes the most sense, because to Gary's point, it's not fair for Dennis Sandow to pay for somebody else's connection. I agree.
I won't ask questions because you said this was comments, and I'll try to limit my remarks to less than 43 minutes. My neighbor hasn't painted his house in ages and won't mow his lawn, and it's degrading the neighborhood. Would you please loan him some money? Not from my taxes. Would you please loan him some money so he can clean up his house and his front yard to neighborhood standards?
The mechanics.
I mean, we are not in the banking, the township is not in the banking business. If someone is required by law to connect to the sewer system, that's their problem. Thank you. I've managed to connect to all the systems that I have to at my house, and I paid for it. Sometimes I couldn't quite afford it, but please, let's not convert this into a charitable foundation.
And Jack and Dennis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the ordinance does permit, if you have a house that's in, not kept properly, we can in fact do exactly what we just suggested. We can clean the place and
Not
put
for
a lien.
property maintenance, we can for
Not
health
for
reasons.
Health reasons.
We've done it for
You
health.
can go to your church and ask them to loan you the money. You can probably go to the Morristown Soup Kitchen and get them to loan you the money. But the municipality should not be in the business of loaning money to individual homeowners. Quite the contrary. If they can afford to pay a $11,000, $12,000 tax bill, they'll have to find another $4,000 to hook up to the sewer system. I hate to be cruel, but I'm not in the business of financing other people's financial misfortune. And that's my comment, and it's as brief as I could make it, sir.
Thank you.
And a reminder that you're very close to running out of time on the tape.
Okay, thank you. Is that a subtle hint?
Was that a motion to adjourn, Dennis?
So, any further comment on that, or are we done with that discussion?
Motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.